their guardians must place themselves in relation to one another as persons whose will resides in those objects, and must behave in such a way that each does not appropriate the commodity of the other, and alienate his own, except through an act to which both parties consent. The guardians must therefore recognize each other as owners of private property. This juridical relation, whose form is the contract, whether as part of a developed legal system or not, is a relation between two wills which mirrors the economic relation. The content of this juridical relation, a relation of two wills, is itself determined by the economic relation. 2. Here the persons exist for one another merely one. In the T.W. 11th century, so renowned for its piety, very delicate things often appear among these commodities. Thus a French poet of the period enumerates among the commodities to be found in the fair of Lendit, alongside clothing, shoes, leather, implements of cultivation, skins, etc., also femmes folies de leur corps. 2. Proudhon creates his ideal of justice éternelle, from the juridical relations that correspond to the production of commodities. He thereby proves, to the consolation of all good petty bourgeois, that the production of commodities is a form as eternal as justice. Then he turns round and seeks to reform the actual production of commodities, and the corresponding legal system, in accordance with this ideal. What would one think of a chemist who, instead of studying the actual laws governing molecular interactions, and on that basis solving definite problems, claimed to regulate? Single quote. Wanton women. This passage comes from the Dit du Lendit, a satirical poem by the medieval French poet Guillot de Paris. The process of exchange 179 is representatives and hence owners of commodities. As we proceed to develop our investigation, we shall find, in general, that the characters who appear on the economic stage are merely personifications of economic relations. It is as the bearers of these economic relations that they come into contact with each other. What chiefly distinguishes a commodity from its owner is the fact that every other commodity counts for it only as the form of appearance of its own value. A born leveler and cynic, it is always ready to exchange not only soul, but body, with each and every other commodity, be it more repulsive than Meritornes herself. The owner makes up for this lack in the commodity of a sense of the concrete, physical body of the other commodity, by his own 5 and more senses. For the owner, his commodity possesses no direct use value. Otherwise, he would not bring it to market. It has use value for others, but for himself its only direct use value is as a bearer of exchange value, and consequently, a means of exchange. 3. He therefore makes up his mind to sell it in return for commodities whose use value is of service to him. All commodities are non-use values for their owners, and use values for their non-owners. Consequently, they must all change hands. But this changing of hands constitutes their exchange, and their exchange puts them in relation with each other as values and realizes them as values. Hence commodities must be realized as values before they can be realized as use values. On the other hand, they must stand the test as use values before they can be realized as values. For the labor expended on them only counts in so far as it is expended in a form which is useful those interactions by means of the eternal ideas of naturalite and affinite. Do we really know any more about usury when we say it contradicts justice éternelle, equite éternelle, mutualite éternelle, and other verités éternelles than the fathers of the church did when they said it was incompatible with grace éternelle, foi éternelle, and la vie und éterne, la de Dieu? 3. For twofold is the use of every object. The one is peculiar to the object as such, the other is not, as a sandal which may be worn and is also exchangeable. Both are uses of the sandal, for even he who exchanges the sandal for the money or food he is in need of, makes use of the sandal as a sandal. But not in its natural way. For it has not been made for the sake of being exchanged. Aristotle, Republic, circa 9. The concept of an object, our person, as the receptacle, repository, bearer, träger, of some thing or tendency quite different from it appears repeatedly in Capital, and I have tried to translate it uniformly as bearer, T. Meritomes, a character from Cervantes' novel Don Quixote. 180 commodities and money for others. However, only the act of exchange can prove whether that labor is useful for others, and its product consequently capable of satisfying the needs of others. The owner of a commodity is prepared to part with it only in return for other commodities whose use value satisfies his own need. So far, exchange is merely an individual process for him. On the other hand, he desires to realize his commodity, as a value, in any other suitable commodity of the same value. It does not matter to him whether his own commodity has any use value for the owner of the other commodity or not. From this point of view, exchange is for him a general social process. But the same process cannot be simultaneously for all owners of commodities both exclusively individual and exclusively social and general. Let us look at the matter a little more closely. To the owner of a commodity, every other commodity counts as the particular equivalent of his own commodity. Hence his own commodity is the universal equivalent for all the others. But since this applies to every owner, there is in fact no commodity acting as universal equivalent, and the commodities possess no general relative form of value under which they can be equated as values and have the magnitude of their values compared. Therefore they definitely do not confront each other as commodities, but as products or use values only. In their difficulties our commodity owners think like Faust, in the beginning was the deed. They have therefore already acted before thinking. The natural laws of the commodity have manifested themselves in the natural instinct of the owners of commodities. They can only bring their commodities into relation as values, and therefore as commodities, by bringing them into an opposing relation with some one other commodity, which serves as the universal equivalent. We have already reached that result by our analysis of the commodity. But only the action of society can turn a particular commodity into the universal equivalent. The social action of all other commodities, therefore, sets apart the particular commodity in which they all represent their values. The natural form of this commodity thereby becomes the socially recognized equivalent form. Through the agency of the social process it becomes the specific social function of the commodity. 1 meter Anfang war die Tat, Goethe, Faust, Part 1, Scene 3, Faust Study, line 1237. The process of exchange 181 which has been set apart to be the universal equivalent. It thus becomes money. Illi unum consi, ium abent et virtutum et potestatem mam bestiae tradunt. Et ne quis possit emir aut vendir, nisici habet characterum aut nomen bestiae, aut numerum nominis eases, apocalypse. Asterisk. Money necessarily crystallizes out of the process of exchange, in which different products of labor are in fact equated with each other, and thus converted into commodities. The historical broadening and deepening of the phenomenon of exchange develops the opposition between use value and value which is latent in the nature of the commodity. The need to give an external expression to this opposition for the purposes of commercial intercourse produces the drive towards an independent form of value, which finds neither rest nor peace until an independent form has been achieved by the differentiation of commodities into commodities and money. At the same rate, then, as the transformation of the products of labor into commodities is accomplished, one particular commodity is transformed into money. Point 4. The direct exchange of products has the form of the simple expression of value in one respect, but not as yet in another. That form was X commodity A equals Y commodity B. The form of the direct exchange of products is X use value A equals Y use value B5. The articles A and B in this case are not as yet commodities, but become so only through the act of exchange. The first way in which From this we may form an estimate of the craftiness of petty bourgeois socialism, which wants to perpetuate the production of commodities while simultaneously abolishing the antagonism between money and commodities, i.e. abolishing money itself, since money only exists in and through this antagonism. Asterisk. One might just as well abolish the Pope while leaving Catholicism in existence. For more on this point see my work Zur Kritik der politischen Ökonomie, page 61 ff. English translation, pp. 83-6, 5. So long as a chaotic mass of articles is offered as the equivalent for a single article, as is often the case among savages, instead of two distinct objects of utility being exchanged, we are only at the threshold of even the direct exchange of products. This is directed at the proposal of John Gray, in The Social System, 1831, for the introduction of labor money, later taken up by Proudhon. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, Revelation chapter 17 verse 13. And that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name, Revelation 13:17. 182 Commodities and money. An object of utility attains the possibility of becoming an exchange value as to exist as a non-use value, as a quantum of use value superfluous to the immediate needs of its owner. Things are in themselves external to man, and therefore alienable. In order that this alienation, Verusung, may be reciprocal, it is only necessary for men to agree tacitly to treat each other as the private owners of those alienable things, and, precisely for that reason, as persons who are independent of each other. But this relationship of reciprocal isolation and foreignness does not exist for the members of a primitive community of natural origin, whether it takes the form of a patriarchal family, an ancient Indian commune or an Inca state. The exchange of commodities begins where communities have their boundaries, at their points of contact with other communities, or with members of the latter. However, as soon as products have become commodities in the external relations of a community, they also, by reaction, become commodities in the internal life of the community. Their quantitative exchange relation is at first determined purely by chance. They become exchangeable through the mutual desire of their owners to alienate them. In the meantime, the need for others' objects of utility gradually establishes itself. The constant repetition of exchange makes it a normal social process. In the course of time, therefore, at least some part of the products must be produced intentionally for the purpose of exchange. From that moment the distinction between the usefulness of things for direct consumption and their usefulness in exchange becomes firmly established. Their use value becomes distinguished from their exchange value. On the other hand, the quantitative proportion in which the things are exchangeable becomes dependent on their production itself. Custom fixes their values at definite magnitudes. In the direct exchange of products, each commodity is a direct means of exchange to its owner, and an equivalent to those who do not possess it, although only in so far as it has use value for them. At this stage, therefore, the articles exchanged do not acquire a value form independent of their own use value, or of the individual needs of the exchangers. The need for this form first develops with the increase in the number and variety of the commodities entering into the process of exchange. The problem and the means for its solution arise simultaneously. Commercial intercourse, in which the owners of commodities exchange and compare their own articles with various other articles, never takes. The process of exchange 183 place unless different kinds of commodities belonging to different owners are exchanged for, and equated as values with, one single further kind of commodity. This further commodity, by becoming the equivalent of various other commodities, directly acquires the form of a universal or social equivalent, if only within narrow limits. The universal equivalent form comes and goes with the momentary social contacts which call it into existence. It is transiently attached to this or that commodity in alternation. But with the development of exchange it fixes itself firmly and exclusively onto particular kinds of commodity, i.e. it crystallizes out into the money form. The particular kind of commodity to which it sticks is at first a matter of accident. Nevertheless, there are two circumstances which are by and large decisive. The money form comes to be attached either to the most important articles of exchange from outside, which are in fact the primitive and spontaneous forms of manifestation of the exchange value of local products, or to the object of utility which forms the chief element of indigenous alienable wealth, for example cattle. Nomadic peoples are the first to develop the money form, because all their worldly possessions are in a movable and therefore directly alienable form, and because their mode of life, by continually bringing them into contact with foreign communities, encourages the exchange of products. Men have often made man himself into the primitive material of money, in the shape of the slave, but they have never done this with the land and soil. Such an idea could only arise in a bourgeois society, and one which was already well developed. It dates from the last third of the 17th century, and the first attempt to implement the idea on a national scale was made a century later, during the French bourgeois revolution. In the same proportion as exchange bursts its local bonds, and the value of commodities accordingly expands more and more into the material embodiment of human labor as such, in that proportion does the money form become transferred to commodities which are by nature fitted to perform the social function of a universal equivalent. Those commodities are the precious metals. The truth of the statement that, although gold and silver are not by nature money, money is by nature gold and silver. 6 is 6. Karl Marx, Op. Cit. Page 135, English translation, page 155. The metals. Are by their nature money. Galliani, Della Moneta, in Custodi's collection, Parti Moderne, Volume 3, page 137. The issue of the assignats in 1789, backed by confiscated church lands. 184 commodities in money shown by the appropriateness of their natural properties for the functions of money. 7. So far, however, we are acquainted with only one function of money, namely to serve as the form of appearance of the value of commodities, that is as the material in which the magnitudes of their values are socially expressed. Only a material whose every sample possesses the same uniform quality can be an adequate form of appearance of value, that is a material embodiment of abstract and therefore equal human labor. On the other hand, since the difference between the magnitudes of value is purely quantitative, the money commodity must be capable of purely quantitative differentiation, it must therefore be divisible at will, and it must also be possible to assemble it again from its component parts. Gold and silver possess these properties by nature. The money commodity acquires a dual-use value. Alongside its special use value as a commodity, gold, for instance, serves to fill hollow teeth, it forms the raw material for luxury articles, etc. It acquires a formal use value, arising out of its specific social function. Since all other commodities are merely particular equivalents for money, the latter being their universal equivalent, they relate to money as particular commodities relate to the universal commodity. 8. We have seen that the money form is merely the reflection thrown upon a single commodity by the relations between all other commodities. That money is a commodity 9 is therefore only a discovery for those who proceed from its finished shape in order to analyze it afterwards. The process of exchange gives to the com 7. For further details on this subject see the chapter on the precious metals in my work cited above, English translation, pp. 153-7, 8. Money is the universal commodity, Very, Op. Cit. Page 16, 9. Silver and gold themselves, which we may call by the general name of bullion, are commodities, rising and falling in value. Bullion then may be reckoned to be of higher value, where the smaller weight will chase the greater quantity of the product or manufacture of the country, etc. S. Clement, A Discourse of the General Notions of Money, Trade, and Exchange, as they stand in relations to each other. By a Merchant, London, 1695, page 7. Silver and gold, coined or uncoined, though they are used for a measure of all other things, are no less a commodity than wine, oil, tobacco, cloth or stuffs, J. Child, A Discourse Concerning Trade, and that in particular of the East Indies, etc. London, 1689, page 2. The stock and riches of the kingdom cannot properly be confined to money, nor ought gold and silver to be excluded from being merchandise. T. Papillon, The East India Trade, a most profitable trade. London, 1677. T. page 4. The process of exchange 185 modity which it has converted into money, not its value but its specific value form. Confusion between these two attributes has misled some writers into maintaining that the value of gold and silver is imaginary. Lo, the fact that money can, in certain functions, be replaced by mere symbols of itself, gave rise to another mistaken notion, that it is itself a mere symbol. Nevertheless, this error did contain the suspicion that the money form of the thing is external to the thing itself, being simply the form of appearance of human relations hidden behind it. In this sense, every commodity is a symbol, since, as value, it is only the material shell of the human labor expended on it. 11. But if it is declared that the social characteristics assumed by material objects, or the material Chirac 10. Gold and silver have value as metals before they are money. Galliani, Op. Cit. Page 72. Locke says, the universal consent of mankind gave to silver, on account of its qualities which made it suitable for money, an imaginary value. John Locke. Some Considerations, etc. 1691, in Works, ed.1777, Volume 2, page 1. S. Law, on the other hand, says, how could different nations give an imaginary value to any single thing? Or how could this imaginary value have maintained itself? But he himself understood very little of the matter. For example, silver was exchanged in proportion to the use value it possessed, consequently in proportion to its real value. By its adoption as money it received an additional value, une valeur additionnelle. Jean Law, Considerations sur ie numéraire et ie commerce, in E. Dyer's edition of Pound Conomutes Phi 1 U Ulciers du 18 siècle, pp. 469-70, 11. Money is there, the commodities, symbol, y de Forbonnus, Elements du Commerce, New U, Leiden, 1776, Volume 2, page 143. As a symbol it is attracted by the commodities, Ibid, page 155. Money is a symbol of a thing and represents it. Montesquieu, Esprit des Lois, L. Yerves, London, 1767, Volume 2, page 3. Money is not a mere symbol, for it is itself wealth. It does not represent the values, it is their equivalent. Latronne, Op. Cit. Page 910. If we consider the concept of value, we must look on the thing itself only as a symbol. It counts not as itself, but as what it is worth. Hegel, Op. Cit. Page 1, 0. Long before the economists, lawyers made fashionable the idea that money is a mere symbol, and that the value of the precious metals is purely imaginary. This they did in the sycophantic service of the royal power, supporting the right of the latter to debase the coinage, during the whole of the Middle Ages, by the traditions of the Roman Empire and the conceptions of money to be found in the Digest. Let no one call into question, says their apt pupil, Philip of Valois, in a decree of 1346, that the trade, the composition, the supply, and the power of issuing ordinances on the currency, belongs exclusively to us and to our royal majesty, to fix such a rate and at such a price as it shall please us and seem good to us. It was a maxim of Roman law that the value of money was fixed by imperial decree. It was expressly forbidden to treat money as a commodity. Pecunias vero nulli a mere fas t. Nam in usu publico constitutas. This is a reference to the philosophy of right, para. 63, edition, English translation, page 240. 186 Commodities and money. Heuristics assumed by the social determinations of labor on the basis of a definite mode of production, are mere symbols. Then it is also declared, at the same time, that these characteristics are the arbitrary product of human reflection. This was the kind of explanation favored by the 18th century. In this way the Enlightenment endeavored, at least temporarily, to remove the appearance of strangeness from the mysterious shapes assumed by human relations whose origins they were unable to decipher. It has already been remarked above that the equivalent form of a commodity does not imply that the magnitude of its value can be determined. Therefore, even if we know that gold is money, and consequently directly exchangeable with all other commodities, this still does not tell us how much 101 b. of gold is worth. For instance, money, like every other commodity, cannot express the magnitude of its value except relatively in other commodities. This value is determined by the labor time required for its production, and is expressed in the quantity of any other commodity in which the same amount of labor time is congealed. 12. This establishing of its relative value occurs at the source of its production by means of barter. As soon as it enters into circulation as money, its value is already given. In the last decades of the 17th century, the first step in the analysis of money, the discovery that money is a commodity, had already been taken, but this was merely the first step, and nothing more. The difficulty lies not in comprehending that D 1.0 nay is a commodity, but in discovering how, why and by what means a commodity becomes money. 130 Portet non esse mersum. There is a good discussion of this by G. F. Bignini, in Saggio sopra il giusto preg. O della Cose, 1751, printed in Custodi's collection, Parti Moderna, Volume 2. In the second part of his work, Bignini directs his polemic especially against the legal gentleman. 12. If a man can bring to London an ounce of silver out of the earth of Peru, in the same time that he can produce a bushel of corn, then the one is the natural price of the other. Now, if by reason of new or more easy mines a man can procure 2 ounces of silver as easily as he formerly did 1, the corn will be as cheap at 10 shillings the bushel as it was before at 5 shillings. Ceteris paribus, William Petty, A Treatise of Taxes and Contributions, London, 1667, page 32, 13. The learned Professor Roscher, after first informing us that the false definitions of money may be divided into 2 main groups, those which make, however, it shall not be lawful for anyone to buy money, for, as it was created for public use, it is not penniceable for it to be a commodity. Codex Theodosianus, lib. 9, tit. 23. The process of exchange 187 we have already seen, from the simplest expression of value, X commodity A equals Y commodity B, that the thing in which the magnitude of the value of another thing is represented appears to have the equivalent form independently of this relation, as a social property inherent in its nature. We followed the process by which this false semblance became firmly established, a process which was completed when the universal equivalent form became identified with the natural form of a particular commodity, and thus crystallized into the money form. What appears to happen is not that a particular commodity becomes money because all other commodities express their values in it, but, on the contrary, that all other commodities universally express their values in a particular commodity because it is money. The movement through which this process has been mediated vanishes in its own result, leaving no trace behind. Without any initiative on their part, the commodities find their own value configuration ready to hand, in the form of a physical commodity existing outside but also alongside them. This physical object, gold or silver in its crude state, becomes, immediately on its emergence from the bowels of the earth, the direct incarnation of all human labor. Hence the magic of money. Men are henceforth related to each other in their social process of production in a purely atomistic way. Their own relations of production therefore assume a material shape which is independent of their control in their conscious individual action. This situation is manifested first by the fact that the products of men's labor universally take on the form of commodities. The riddle of the money fetish is therefore the riddle of the commodity fetish, now become visible and dazzling to our eyes. It more, and those which make it less, than a commodity, gives us a motley catalogue of works on the nature of money, which does not provide even the glimmer of an insight into the real history of the theory. He then draws this moral. For the rest, it is not to be denied that most of the later economists do not bear sufficiently in mind the peculiarities that distinguish money from other commodities. It is then, after all, either more or less than a commodity. So far, the semi-mercantilist reaction of Genie is not altogether without foundation. Wilhelm Roscher, Die Grundlagen der Nationalökonomie, 3rd eden, 1858, pp.207-10. More, less, not sufficiently, so far, not altogether. What a way of determining one's concepts. And this eclectic professorial twaddle is modestly baptized by Herr Roscher, the anatomico-physiological method of political economy. However, he does deserve credit for one discovery, namely, that money is a pleasant commodity. Chapter 3. Money, or the circulation of commodities. The measure of values throughout this work I assume that gold is the money commodity, for the sake of simplicity. The first main function of gold is to supply commodities with the material for the expression of their values, or to represent their values as magnitudes of the same denomination, qualitatively equal and quantitatively comparable. It thus acts as a universal measure of value, and only through performing this function does gold, the specific equivalent commodity, become money. It is not money that renders the commodities commensurable. Quite the contrary. Because all commodities, as values, are objectified human labor, and therefore in themselves commensurable, their values can be communally measured in one and underscore the same specific commodity, and this commodity can be converted into the common measure of their values, that is, into money. Money as a measure of value is the necessary form of appearance of the measure of value which is immanent in commodities, namely labor time. 1. The question why money does not itself directly represent labor time, so that a piece of paper may represent, for instance, X hours labor, comes down simply to the question why, on the basis of commodity production, the products of labor must take the form of commodities. This is obvious, because their taking the form of commodities implies their differentiation into commodities, on the one hand, and the money commodity, on the other. It is also asked why private labor cannot be treated as its opposite, directly social labor. I have elsewhere discussed exhaustively the shallow utopianism of the idea of labor money in a society founded on the production of commodities, op. Cit. Page 61 if. On this point I will only say further that Owen's labor money, for instance, is no more money than a theater ticket is. Owen presupposes directly socialized labor, a form of production diametrically opposed to the production of commodities. The certificate of labor is merely English translation, pp. 83 ff. Money, or the circulation of commodities 189. The expression of the value of a commodity in gold, X commodity A equals Y money commodity, is its money form or price. A single equation, such as 1 ton of iron equals 2 ounces of gold, now suffices to express the value of the iron in a socially valid manner. There is no longer any need for this equation to figure as a link in the chain of equations that express the values of all other commodities, because the equivalent commodity, gold, already possesses the character of money. The general relative form of value of commodities has therefore resumed its original shape of simple or individual relative value. On the other hand, the expanded relative expression of value, the endless series of equations, has now become the specific relative form of value of the money commodity. However, the endless series itself is now a socially given fact in the shape of the prices of the commodities. We have only to read the quotations of a price list backwards to find the magnitude of the value of money expressed in all sorts of commodities. As against this, money has no price. In order to form a part of this uniform relative form of value of the other commodities, it would have to be brought into relation with itself as its own equivalent. The price or money form of commodities is, like their form of value generally, quite distinct from their palpable and real bodily form. It is therefore a purely ideal or notional form. Although invisible, the value of iron, linen and corn exists in these very articles. It is signified through their equality with gold, even though this relation with gold exists only in their heads, so to speak. The guardian of the commodities must therefore lend them his tongue, or hang a ticket on them, in order to communicate their prices to the outside world. 2. Since the expression of the value of commodity evidence of the part taken by the individual in the common labor, and of his claim to a certain portion of the common product which has been set aside for consumption. But Owen never made the mistake of presupposing the production of commodities, while, at the same time, by juggling with money, trying to circumvent the necessary conditions of that form of production. 2. Savages and semi-savages use the tongue differently. Captain Perry says of the inhabitants of the west coast of Baffin's Bay, in this case, the case of barter, they licked it, the thing represented to them, twice to their tongues, after which they seemed to consider the bargain satisfactorily concluded. In the same way, among the eastern Eskimo, the exchanger licked each article on. W. E. Perry, Journal of a Voyage for the Discovery of a Northwest Passage, London, 1821, page 227. 190 Commodities and money ties in gold is a purely ideal act. Asterisk, we may use purely imaginary or ideal gold to perform this operation. Every owner of commodities knows that he is nowhere near turning them into gold when he has given their value the form of a price or of imaginary gold, and that it does not require the tiniest particle of real gold to give a valuation in gold of millions of pounds worth of commodities. In its function as measure of value, money therefore serves only in an imaginary or ideal capacity. This circumstance has given rise to the wildest theories. 3. But, although the money that performs the functions of a measure of value is only imagined, why, the price depends entirely on the actual substance that is money. The value, i.e. the quantity of human labor, which is contained in a ton of iron, is expressed by an imaginary quantity of the money commodity which contains the same amount of labor as the iron. Therefore, according to whether it is gold, silver or copper which is serving as the measure of value, the value of the ton of iron will be expressed by very different prices, or will be represented by very different quantities of those metals. If therefore two different commodities, such as gold and silver, serve simultaneously as measures of value, all commodities will have two separate price expressions, the price in gold and the price in silver, which will quietly coexist as long as the ratio of the value of silver to that of gold remains unchanged, say at 15 to 1. However, every alteration in this ratio disturbs the ratio between the gold prices and the silver prices of commodities, and thus proves in fact that a duplication of the measure of value contradicts the function of that measure. 4. Receiving it. If the tongue is thus used in the north as the organ of appropriation, it is no wonder that in the south the stomach serves as the organ of accumulated property, and that a Kaffir estimates the wealth of a man by the size of his belly. The Kaffirs know what they are doing, for at the same time as the official British Health Report of 1864 was bemoaning the deficiency of fat-forming substances among a large part of the working class, a certain Dr. Harvey, not, however, the man who discovered the circulation of the blood, was doing well by advertising recipes for reducing the surplus fat of the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy. 3. See Karl Marx, Zur Kritik etc., Theories of the Standard of Money, pp. 53 ff. English translation, pp. 76 ff. 4. Wherever silver and gold exist side by side as legal money, i.e. as measure of value, the vain attempt has always been made to treat them as one in other words, it is an act which takes place entirely in the mind, and involves no physical transaction. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 191 Commodities with definite prices all appear in this form. A commodity A equals X gold. B commodity B equals Y gold. C commodity C equals Z gold, etc., where A, B, C represent definite quantities of the commodities A, B, C and X, Y, Z definite quantities of gold. The values of these commodities are therefore changed into imaginary quantities of gold of different magnitudes. Hence, in spite of the confusing variety of the commodities themselves, their values become magnitudes of the same denomination, gold magnitudes. As such, they are now capable of being compared with each other and measured, and the course of development produces the need to compare them, for technical reasons, with some fixed quantity of gold as their unit of measurement. This unit, by subsequent division into aliquot parts, becomes itself the standard of measurement. Before they become money, gold, silver and copper already possess such standards in their weights, so that, for example, a pound, which serves as a unit of measurement, can on the one hand be divided into ounces, and on the other hand be same substance. If one assumes that a given labor time must invariably be objectified in the same proportion in silver and gold, then one assumes, in fact, that gold and silver are the same substance, and that silver, the less valuable metal, represents a constant fraction of gold. From the reign of Edward III to the time of George II, the history of money in England consists of one long series of perturbations caused by the clash between the legally fixed ratio between the values of gold and silver, and the fluctuations in their real values. At one time gold was too high, at another, silver. The metal that was estimated below its value was withdrawn from circulation, melted down and exported. The ratio between the two metals was then again altered by law, but the new nominal ratio soon came into conflict, in its turn, with the real ratio. In our own times, the slight and transient fall in the value of gold compared with silver, which was a consequence of the Indian and Chinese demand for silver, produced on a far more extended scale in France the same phenomena, export of silver, and its expulsion from circulation by gold. During the years 1855, 1856 and 1857, the excess in France of gold imports over gold exports amounted to 41,580,000 pounds, while the excess of silver exports over silver imports came to 34,704,000 pounds. In fact, in countries in which both metals are legally measures of value, and therefore both legal tender, so that everyone has the option of paying in either metal, the metal that rises in value is at a premium, and, like every other commodity, measures its price in the overvalued metal which alone serves in reality as the measure of value. All the experience of history in this area can be reduced simply to this fact, that where two commodities perform by law the functions of a measure of value, in practice only one maintains that position. Karl Marx, Op. Cit. pp. 52-3, English edition, pp. 75-6. 192 commodities and money combined with others to make up hundredweights. 5. It is owing to this that, in all metallic currencies, the names given to the standards of money or of price were originally taken from the pre-existing names of the standards of weight. As measure of value and as standard of price, money performs two quite different functions. It is the measure of value as the social incarnation of human labor, it is the standard of price as a quantity of metal with a fixed weight. As the measure of value it serves to convert the values of all the manifold commodities into prices, into imaginary quantities of gold. As the standard of price it measures those quantities of gold. The measure of values may assures commodities considered as values. The standard of price measures, on the contrary, quantities of gold by a unit quantity of gold, not the value of one quantity of gold by the weight of another. For the standard of price, a certain weight of gold must be fixed as the unit of measurement. In this case, as in all cases where quantities of the same denomination are to be measured, the stability of the measurement is of decisive importance. Hence the less the unit of measurement, here a quantity of gold, is subject to variation, the better the standard of price fulfills its office. But gold can serve as a measure of value only because it is itself a product of labor, and therefore potentially variable in value. 6. It is, first of all, quite clear that a change in the value of gold in no way impairs its function as a standard of price. No matter how the value of gold varies, different quantities of gold always remain in the same value relation to each other. If the value of gold fell by 1,000%, 12 ounces of gold would continue to have 12 times the value of 1 ounce of gold, and when we are dealing with prices we are only concerned with the relation between different quantities of gold. Since, on the other hand, an ounce of gold undergoes no change in weight when its value rises or falls. Number 5. The peculiar circumstance that while the ounce of gold serves in England as the unit of the standard of money, it is not divided up into aliquot parts, has been explained as follows. Our coinage was originally adapted to the employment of silver only, hence an ounce of silver can always be divided into a certain adequate number of pieces of coin. But as gold was introduced at a later period into a coinage adapted only to silver, an ounce of gold cannot be coined into an aliquot number of pieces. Maclaren, A Sketch of the History of the Currency, London, 1858, page 16, 6. With English writers the confusion over measure of value and standard of price, standard of value, as indescribable. Their functions, and therefore their names, are constantly interchanged. Money, or the circulation of commodities 1 foot 93 change can take place in the weight of its aliquot parts. Thus gold always renders the same service as a fixed measure of price, however much its value may vary. Moreover, a change in the value of gold does not prevent it from fulfilling its function as measure of value. The change affects all commodities simultaneously, and therefore, other things being equal, leaves the mutual relations between their values unaltered, although those values are now all expressed in higher or lower gold prices than before. Just as in the case of the estimation of the value of a commodity in the use value of any other commodity, so also in this case, where commodities are valued in gold, we assume nothing more than that the production of a given quantity of gold costs, at a given period, a given amount of labor. As regards the fluctuations of commodity prices in general, they are subject to the laws of the simple relative expression of value which we developed in an earlier chapter. A general rise in the prices of commodities can result either from a rise in their values, which happens when the value of money remains constant, or from a fall in the value of money, which happens when the values of commodities remain constant. The process also occurs in reverse. A general fall in prices can result either from a fall in the values of commodities, if the value of money remains constant, or from a rise in the value of money, if the values of commodities remain constant. It therefore by no means follows that a rise in the value of money necessarily implies a proportional fall in the prices of commodities, or that a fall in the value of money implies a proportional rise in prices. This would hold only for commodities whose value remains constant. But commodities whose value rises simultaneously with and in proportion to that of money would retain the same price. And if their value rose either slower or faster than that of money, the fall or rise in their prices would be determined by the difference between the path described by their value and that described by the value of money. And so on. Let us now go back to considering the price form. For various reasons, the money names of the metal weights are gradually separated from their original weight names, the historically decisive reasons being 1. The introduction of foreign money among less developed peoples. This happened at Rome in its early days, where gold and silver coins circulated at first as foreign commodities. The names of these foreign coins were different from those of the indigenous weights. 2. With the development of material wealth, 194 commodities and money, the more precious metal extrudes the less precious from its function as measure of value. Silver drives out copper, gold drives out silver, however much this sequence may contradict the chronology of the poets. 7. The word pound, for instance, was the money name given to an actual pound weight of silver. As soon as gold had driven out silver as a measure of value, the same name became attached to, say, 1/15 of a pound of gold, depending on the ratio between the values of gold and silver. Pound as a money name and pound as the ordinary weight name of gold are now two different things. 8. 3. Centuries of continuous debasement of the currency by kings and princes have in fact left nothing behind of the original weights of gold coins but their names. 9. These historical processes have made the separation of the money name from the weight name into a fixed popular custom. Since the standard of money is on the one hand purely conventional, while on the other hand it must possess universal validity, it is in the end regulated by law. A given weight of one of the precious metals, an ounce of gold for instance, becomes officially divided into aliquot parts, baptized by the law as a pound, a thaler, etc. These aliquot parts, which then serve as the actual units of money, are subdivided into other aliquot parts with legal names, such as a shilling, a penny, etc. 10. But, despite this, a definite weight of metal remains the standard of metallic money. All that has changed is the subdivision and the denomination of the money. The prices, or quantities of gold, into which the values of commodities are ideally changed are therefore now expressed in the money names, or the legally valid names of the subdivisions of the 7. In any case, its historical validity is not entirely universal. 8. Thus the pound sterling denotes less than 1/3 of its original weight, the pound Scots, before the Union, only 1/36, the French livre 1/74, the Spanish maravedí, less than 1/1, and the Portuguese rei a still smaller fraction. 9. The coins which today have a merely ideal denomination are in all nations the oldest. Once upon a time they were all real, and because they were real people reckoned with them. Galliani, Della Moneta, Op. Cit. Page 153, 10. David Urquhart remarks in his Familiar Words on the monstrosity, that nowadays a pound, sterling, which is the unit of the English standard of money, is equal to about 1/4 of an ounce of gold. This is falsifying a measure, not establishing a standard. In this false denomination of the weight of gold, he finds what he finds everywhere else, the falsifying hand of civilization. The union of Scotland with England in 1707. David Urquhart, Familiar Words as Affecting England in the English, London, 1855, page 105. Money, or the circulation of commodities 195 gold standard made for the purpose of reckoning. Hence, instead of saying that a quarter of wheat is worth an ounce of gold, people in England would say that it was worth 3 pounds 17s, 10 id. In this way commodities express by their money names how much they are worth, and money serves as money of account whenever it is a question of fixing a thing as a value and therefore in its money form. The name of a thing is entirely external to its nature. I know nothing of a man if I merely know his name is Jacob. In the same way, every trace of the money relation disappears in the money names pound, thaler, franc, ducat, etc. The confusion caused by attributing a hidden meaning to these Kabbalistic signs is made even greater by the fact that these money names express both the values of commodities and, simultaneously, aliquot parts of a certain weight of metal, namely the weight of the metal which serves as the standard of money. 12. On the other hand, it is in fact necessary that value, as opposed to the multifarious objects of the world of commodities, should develop into this form, a material and non-n1 but also a simple social form. 3. Price is the money name of the labor objectified in Acom 11. When Anacharsis was asked what the Greeks used money for, he replied, for reckoning. Athenaeus, Diagnosophisti, BKIV, 49, version 2, ed. Schweighauser, 1802, 12. Because his standard of price gold is expressed by the same names of account as the prices of commodities. For example, 3 pounds 17s, 10 LD, may denote an ounce of gold just as well as a ton of iron. These names of account are called the mint price of gold. Thus the extraordinary notion arose that gold is estimated in its own material and that, unlike all other commodities, its price is fixed by the state. The establishing of names of account for definite weights of gold was mistaken for the establishing of the value of these weights. Karl Marx, Op. Cit. Page 52, English edition, page 74, 13. Cf. Theories of the Standard of Money, in Zurcher, Tick etc., pp. 53 featuring, English edition, pp. 76 featuring. Some theorists had fantastic notions of raising or lowering the mint price of money by getting the state to transfer to greater or smaller weights of gold or silver the names already legally appropriated to fixed weights of those metals, so that for example, ounce of gold could be minted into 40 shillings in the future instead of 20. However, Petty dealt with these so exhaustively in his Quantulumcunque concerning money, to the Lord Marquis of Halifax, 1682, at least in those cases where they aimed not at clumsy financial operations against public and private creditors but rather at economic quack remedies, that even his immediate followers, Sir Dudley North and John Locke, not to mention later ones, could only repeat what he said more shallowly. If the wealth of a nation, he remarks, could be decoupled by a proclamation, it were strange that such proclamations have not long since been made by our governors. Petty, Op. Cit. Page 36. 196 Commodities and money modity. Hence the expression of the equivalence of a commodity with the quantity of money whose name is that commodity's price is a tautology. 14 Just as the expression of the relative value of a commodity is an expression of the equivalence of two commodities. But although price, being the exponent of the magnitude of a commodity's value, is the exponent of its exchange ratio with money, it does not follow that the exponent of this exchange ratio is necessarily the exponent of the magnitude of the commodity's value. Suppose two equal quantities of socially necessary labor are respectively represented by 1/4 of wheat and 2 pounds, approximately, ounce of gold, 2 pounds. Is the expression in money of the magnitude of the value of the quarter of wheat, or its price? If circumstances now allow this price to be raised to 3 pounds, or compel it to be reduced to 1 pound, then although 1 pound and pound the third of may be too small or too large to give proper expression to the magnitude of the wheat's value, they are nevertheless prices of the wheat, for they are, in the first place, the form of its value, i.e. money, and, in the second place, the opponents of its exchange ratio with money. If the conditions of production, or the productivity of labor, remain constant, the same amount of social labor time must be expended on the reproduction of a quarter of wheat, both before and after the change in price. This situation is not dependent either on the will of the wheat producer or on that of the owners of the other commodities. The magnitude of the value of a commodity therefore expresses a necessary relation to social labor time which is inherent in the process by which its value is created. With the transformation of the magnitude of value into the price, this necessary relation appears as the exchange ratio between a single commodity and the money commodity which exists outside it. This relation, however, may express both the magnitude of value of the commodity and the greater or lesser quantity of money for which it can be sold under the given circumstances. The possibility, therefore, of a quantitative incongruity between price and magnitude of value, i.e. the possibility that the price may diverge from the magnitude of value, is inherent in the price form itself. This is not a defect, but, on the contrary, it makes this form the adequate one for a mode of production whose laws can only assert themselves as blindly operating averages between constant irregularities. 14. Or indeed it must be admitted that a million in money is worth more than an equal value in commodities, Latrone, Op. Cit. Page 919, and hence that one value is worth more than another value which is equal to it. Money, or the circulation o commodities 197 The price form, however, is not only compatible with the possibility of a quantitative incongruity between magnitude of value and price, i.e. between the magnitude of value and its own expression in money, but it may also harbor a qualitative contradiction, with the result that price ceases altogether to express value, despite the fact that money is nothing but the value form of commodities. Things which in and for themselves are not commodities, things such as conscience, honor, etc., can be offered for sale by their holders, and thus acquire the form of commodities through their price. Hence a thing can, formally speaking, have a price without having a value. The expression of price is in this case imaginary, like certain quantities in mathematics. On the other hand, the imaginary price form may also conceal a real value relation or one derived from it, as for instance the price of uncultivated land, which is without value because no human labor is objectified in it. Like the relative form of value in general, price expresses the value of a commodity, for instance a ton of iron, by asserting that a given quantity of the equivalent, for instance an ounce of gold, is directly exchangeable with iron. But it by no means asserts the converse, that iron is directly exchangeable with gold. In order, therefore, that a commodity may in practice operate effectively as exchange value, it must divest itself of its natural physical body and become transformed from merely imaginary into real gold, although this act of transubstantiation may be more troublesome for it than the transition from necessity to freedom for the Hegelian concept, the casting of his shell for a lobster, or the putting off of the old Adam for St. Jerome. One's though a commodity may, alongside its real shape, iron, for instance, possess an ideal value shape or an imagined gold shape in the form of its price, it cannot simultaneously be both real iron and real gold. To establish its price it is sufficient for it to be equated with gold in the imagination. But to enable it to render its owner the service of a universal equivalent, it must be actually replaced by gold. If the owner of the iron were to go to the owner of some other earthly 15. If Jerome had to wrestle hard in his youth with the material flesh, as is shown by his fight in the desert with visions of beautiful women, he had also to wrestle in his old age with the spiritual flesh. I thought, he says, I was in the spirit before the judge of the universe. Who art thou? Asked a voice. I ale one a Christian. Thou liest, thundered back the great judge, thou art not but a Ciceronian. Letter 22, ad Eustochium. 198 Commodities and money commodity, and were to refer him to the price of iron as proof that it was already money, his answer would be the terrestrial equivalent of the answer given by St. Peter in heaven to Dante, when the latter recited the creed, Assai bene e trascorsa desta moneta gila, egaei, peso, ma dimi se tu tai nella tua borsa. The price form therefore implies both the exchangeability of commodities for money and the necessity of exchanges. On the other hand, gold serves as an ideal measure of value only because it has already established itself as the money commodity in the process of exchange. Hard cash lurks within the ideal measure of value. 2. The means of circulation. A. The metamorphosis of commodities. We saw in a former chapter that the exchange of commodities implies contradictory and mutually exclusive conditions. The further development of the commodity does not abolish these contradictions, but rather provides the form within which they have room to move. This is, in general, the way in which real contradictions are resolved. For instance, it is a contradiction to depict one body as constantly falling towards another and at the same time constantly flying away from it. The ellipse is a form of motion within which this contradiction is both realized and resolved. Insofar as the process of exchange transfers commodities from hands in which they are non-use values to hands in which they are use values, it is a process of social metabolism. The product of one kind of useful labor replaces that of another. Once a commodity has arrived at a situation in which it can serve as a use value, it falls out of the sphere of exchange into that of consumption. But the former sphere alone interests us here. We therefore have to consider the whole process in its formal aspect, that is to, right well hath now been tested this coin's alloy and weight. But tell me if thou hast it in thy purse. Dante, Divina Commedia, Paradiso, Canto 24, lines 84-5. Here Marx introduces for the first time the concept of 6. Metabolism, Stoffwechsel. This biological analogy plays a considerable part in his analysis of circulation and the labor process. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 199 say, the change in form or the metamorphosis of commodities through which the social metabolism is mediated. This change of form has been very imperfectly grasped as yet, owing to the circumstance that, quite apart from the lack of clarity in the concept of value itself, every change of form in a commodity results from the exchange of two commodities, namely an ordinary commodity and the money commodity. If we keep in mind only this material aspect, that is, the exchange of the commodity for gold, we overlook the very thing we ought to observe, namely what has happened to the form of the commodity. We do not see that gold, as a mere commodity, is not money, and that the other commodities, through their prices, themselves relate to gold as the medium for expressing their own shape in money. Commodities first enter into the process of exchange ungilded and unsweetened, retaining their original home-grown shape. Exchange, however, produces a differentiation of the commodity into two elements, commodity and money, an external opposition which expresses the opposition between use value and value which is inherent in it. In this opposition, commodities as use values confront money as exchange value. On the other hand, both sides of this opposition are commodities, hence themselves unities of use value and value. But this unity of differences is expressed at two opposite poles, and at each pole in an opposite way. This is the alternating relation between the two poles. The commodity is in reality a use value. Its existence as a value appears only ideally, in its price, through which it is related to the real embodiment of its value. The gold which confronts it is its opposite. Inversely, the material of gold ranks only as the materialization of value, as money. It is therefore in reality exchange value. Its use value AP pairs only ideally in the series of expressions of relative value within which it confronts all the other commodities as the totality of real embodiments of its utility. These antagonistic forms of the commodities are the real forms of motion of the process of exchange. Let us now accompany the owner of some commodity, say our old friend the linen weaver, to the scene of action, the market. His commodity, 20 yards of linen, has a definite price, £2. He exchanges it for the £2, and then, being a man of the old school, he parts for the £2 in return for a family Bible of the same price. The linen, for him a mere commodity, a bearer of value, is alienated in exchange for gold, which is the shape of the linen's value. Then 200 commodities and money is taken out of this shape and alienated again in exchange for another commodity, the Bible, which is destined to enter the weaver's house as an object of utility and there to satisfy his family's need for edification. The process of exchange is therefore accomplished through two metamorphoses of opposite yet mutually complementary character. The conversion of the commodity into money, and the reconversion of the money into a commodity. 16 The two moments of this metamorphosis are at once distinct transactions by the weaver, selling, or the exchange of the commodity for money, and buying, or the exchange of the money for a commodity, and the unity of the two acts, selling in order to buy. The end result of the transaction, from the point of view of the weaver, is that instead of being in possession of the linen, he now has the Bible. Instead of his original commodity, he now possesses another of the same value but of different utility. He procures his other means of subsistence and of production in a similar way. For the weaver, the whole process accomplishes nothing more than the exchange of the product of his labor for the product of someone else's, nothing more than an exchange of products. The process of exchange is therefore accomplished through the following changes of form. Commodity money commodity CMC as far as concerns its material content, the movement is CC, the exchange of one commodity for another, the metabolic interaction of social labor, in whose result the process itself becomes extinguished. CM first metamorphosis of the commodity or sale. The leap taken by value from the body of the commodity into the body of the gold is the commodity's cytomortale, as I have called it elsewhere. If the leap falls short, it is not the commodity which is de 16. Fix £8 OU. 1 TUPOC, TIV 1 foot CXILE, TE, A6 CXL 7 TN, VTCX, ATV 0 feet HP and XAEL1, OC, XCXLM1 PC7 TCXVT, A, V, and A7 TE, PX PUAO XPILCX, TCHO XCXTXP ILN, A, VXPUA6C, F. Lassalle, Die Philosophie Herakleitos des Dunkeln, Berlin, 1858, Volume 1, page 222. Lassalle, in his note on this passage, page 224, n. 3, erroneously makes money a mere symbol of value. As Heraclitus says, all things exchange for fire, and fire for all things, just as gold does for goods and goods for gold. Plutarch, Moralia, the E at Delphi, 388d. See a contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, page 88. Money, or the circulation of commodities 201 frauded but rather its owner. The social division of labor makes the nature of his labor as one-sided as his needs are many-sided. This is precisely the reason why the product of his labor serves him solely as exchange value. But it cannot acquire universal social validity as an equivalent form except by being converted into money. That money, however, is in someone else's pocket. To allow it to be drawn out, the commodity produced by its owner's labor must above all be a use value for the owner of the money. The labor expended on it must therefore be of a socially useful kind, i.e. it must maintain its position as a branch of the social division of labor. But the division of labor is an organization of production which has grown up naturally, a web which has been, and continues to be, woven behind the backs of the producers of commodities. Perhaps the commodity is the product of a new kind of labor, and claims to satisfy a newly arisen need, or is even trying to bring forth a new need on its own account. Perhaps a particular operation, although yesterday it still formed one out of the many operations conducted by one producer in creating a given commodity, may today tear itself out of this framework, establish itself as an independent branch of labor, and send its part of the product to market as an independent commodity. The circumstances may or may not be ripe for such a process of separation. Today the product satisfies a social need. Tomorrow it may perhaps be expelled partly or completely from its place by a similar product. Moreover, although our weaver's labor may be a recognized branch of the social division of labor, yet that fact is by no means sufficient to guarantee the utility of his 20 yards of linen. If the society's need for linen, and such a need has a limit like every other need, has already been satisfied by the products of rival weavers, our friend's product is superfluous, redundant and consequently useless. Although people do not look a gift horse in the mouth, our friend does not frequent the market to make presents of his products. Let us assume, however, that the use value of his product does maintain itself, and that the commodity therefore attracts money. Now we have to ask, how much money? No doubt the answer is already anticipated in the price of the commodity, which is the exponent of the magnitude of its value. We leave out of consideration here any possible subjective errors in calculation by the owner of the commodity, which will immediately be corrected objectively in the market. We suppose him to have spent on his product only the average socially necessary 202 commodities and money quantity of labor time. The price of the commodity, therefore, is merely the money name of the quantity of social labor objectified in it. But now the old established conditions of production in weaving are thrown into the melting pot, without the permission of, and behind the back of, our weaver. What was yesterday undoubtedly labor time socially necessary to the production of a yard of linen ceases to be so today, a fact which the owner of the money is only too eager to prove from the prices quoted by our friend's competitors. Unluckily for the weaver, people of his kind are in plentiful supply. Let us suppose, finally, that every piece of linen on the market contains nothing but socially necessary labor time. In spite of this, all these pieces taken as a whole may contain superfluously expended labor time. If the market cannot stomach the whole quantity at the normal price of 2 shillings a yard, this proves that too great a portion of the total social labor time has been expended in the form of weaving. The effect is the same as if each individual weaver had expended more labor time on his particular product than was socially necessary. As the German proverb has it, caught together, hung together. All the linen on the market counts as one single article of commerce, and each piece of linen is only an aliquot part of it. And in fact the value of each single yard is also nothing but the materialization of the same socially determined quantity of homogeneous human labor. We see then that commodities are in love with money, but that the course of true love never did run smooth. The quantitative articulation, Gliederung, of society's productive organism, by which its scattered elements are integrated into the system of the division of labor, is as haphazard and spontaneous as its qualitative articulation. The owners of commodities therefore find out that the same division of labor which turns them into independent private producers also makes the social process of production and the relations of the individual producers to each other within that process independent of the producers themselves. They also find out that the independence of the individuals from each other has as. In a letter of the 28th of November 1878 to N.F. Danielson, the Russian translator of Capital, Marx made the following alteration to this sentence, and in fact the value of each single yard is also nothing but the materialization of a part of the quantity of social labor expended in the whole amount of the linen. An analogous correction was made in a copy of the second German edition of the first volume of Capital which belonged to Marx, however this was not in his handwriting. Note by the Institute of Marxism-Leninism. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 203 its counterpart and supplement a system of all-round material dependence. The division of labor converts the product of labor into a commodity, and thereby makes necessary its conversion into money. At the same time, it makes it a matter of chance whether this transubstantiation succeeds or not. Here, however, we have to look at the phenomenon in its pure shape, and must therefore assume it has proceeded normally. In any case, if the process is to take place at all, i.e. if the commodity is not impossible to sell, a change of form must always occur, although there may be an abnormal loss or accretion of substance. That is, of the magnitude of value. The seller has his commodity replaced by gold, the buyer has his gold replaced by a commodity. The striking phenomenon here is that a commodity and gold, 20 yards of linen and 2 pounds, have changed hands and places, in other words that they have been exchanged. But what is the commodity exchanged for? For the universal shape assumed by its own value. And what is the gold exchanged for? For a particular form of its own use value. Why does gold confront the linen as money? Because the linen's price of 2 pounds, its money name, already brings it into relation with the gold as money. The commodity is divested of its original form through its sale, the moment its use value actually attracts the gold, which previously had a merely imaginary existence in its price. The realization of a commodity's price, or of its merely ideal value form, is therefore at the same time, and inversely, the realization of the merely ideal use value of money. The conversion of a commodity into money is the conversion of money into a commodity. This single process is two-sided. From one pole, that of the commodity owner, it is a sale; from the other pole, that of the money owner, it is a purchase. In other words, a sale is a purchase. CM is also MC 17. Up to this point we have considered only one economic relation between men, a relation between owners of commodities in which they appropriate the produce of the labor of others by alienating, enefremden, the produce of their own labor. Hence, for 1 com 17, every sale is a purchase. Dr. Quesnay, Dialogues sur e-commerce et les travaux des artisans, Physiocrates, ed. Dyra, Part 1, Paris, 1846, page 170, or, as Quesnay says in his Maximes Générales, to sell is to buy. This quotation appears in Dupont de Nemours, Maximes du Dr. Quesnay, printed in Physiocrates, ed. Dyra, Part 1, Paris, 1846, page 392. 204 Commodities and money. Commodity owner to meet with another, in the form of a money owner, it is necessary either that the product of the latter should possess by its nature the form of money, i.e. it should be gold, the material of which money consists, or that his product should already have changed its skin and stripped off its original form of a useful object. In order to function as money, gold must of course enter the market at some point or other. This point is to be found at its source of production, where the gold is exchanged, as the immediate product of labor, for some other product of equal value. But from that moment onwards, it always represents the realized price of some commodity. Ls leaving aside its exchange for other commodities at the source of production, gold is, in the hands of every commodity owner, his own commodity divested, entlosert, of its original shape by being alienated, verlosert. It is the product of a sale or of the first metamorphosis. CM.19 Gold, as we saw, became ideal money, or a measure of value, because all commodities measured their values in it, and thus made it the imaginary opposite of their natural shape as objects of utility, hence the shape of their value. It became real money because the commodities, through their complete alienation, suffered a divestiture or transformation of their real shapes as objects of utility, thus making it the real embodiment of their values. When they thus assume the shape of values, commodities strip off every trace of their natural and original use value, and of the particular kind of useful labor to which they owe their creation, in order to pupate into the homogeneous social materialization of undifferentiated human labor. From the mere look of a piece of money, we cannot tell what breed of commodity has been transformed into it. In their money form all commodities look alike. Hence money may be dirt, although dirt is not money. We will assume that the 2 golden coins in return for which our weaver has parted with his linen are the metamorphosed shape of a quarter of wheat. The sale of the linen, cm, is at the same time its purchase, mc, but this process, considered as the sale of the linen, starts off a move 18. The price of one commodity can only be paid by the price of another commodity. Mercier de la Rivière, L. Ordre naturel et essentiel des sociétés politiques, Phys. Ocrates, ed. Dyra, Part 2, page 554, 19. In order to have this money, one must have made a sale, Ibid. Page 543. Cf. Grundrisse, page 196. Appropriation through and by means of divestiture, entauserung, and alienation, verusung, is the fundamental condition of commodity circulation. Mon yi or the circulation of commodities. 205 Ment, which ends with its opposite, the purchase of a Bible. Considered as purchase of the linen, on the other hand, the process completes a movement which began with its opposite, the sale of the wheat. Cm, linen money, which is the first phase of CMC, linen money Bible, is also MC, money linen. The last phase of another movement CMC, wheat money linen. The first metamorphosis of one commodity, its transformation from the commodity form into money, is therefore also invariably the second, and diametrically opposite, metamorphosis of some other commodity, the retransformation of the latter from money into a commodity. 20 MC the second or concluding metamorphosis of the commodity, purchase. Money is the absolutely alienable commodity, because it is all other commodities divested of their shape, the product of their universal alienation. It reads all prices backwards, and thus as it were mirrors itself in the bodies of all other commodities, which provide the material through which it can come into being as a commodity. At the same time, the prices, those wooing glances cast at money by commodities, define the limit of its convertibility, namely its own quantity. Since every commodity disappears when it becomes money, it is impossible to tell from the money itself how it got into the hands of its possessor, or what article has been changed into it. Non olet. Asterisk from whatever source it may come. If it represents, on the one hand, a commodity which has been sold, it also represents, on the other hand, a commodity which can be bought. 21 MC, a purchase, is at the same time CM, a sale. The concluding metamorphosis of one commodity is the first metamorphosis of another. For our weaver, the life of his commodity ends with the Bible into which he has reconverted his £2. But suppose the seller of the Bible turns the £2 set free by the weaver into brandy. MC, the concluding phase of CMC, Linen Money Bible, is also CM, the first phase of CMC, Bible Money 20. As remarked previously, the actual producer of gold or silver forms an exception. He exchanges his product without having first sold it. 21. If money represents, in our hands, the things we can wish to buy, it also represents the things we have sold for this money. Mercier de la Rivière, Op. Cit. Page 586. Single quote. It, money, has no smell. This is alleged to have been the reply of the Roman Emperor Vespasian to his son Titus, when the latter reproached him for obtaining money by taxing the public lavatories. 206 Commodities and money brandy. Since the producer of the commodity offers only a single product, he often sells it in large quantities, whereas the fact that he has many needs compels him to split up the price realized, the sum of money set free, into numerous purchases. Hence a sale leads to many purchases of different commodities. The concluding metamorphosis of a commodity thus constitutes an aggregate of the first metamorphoses of other commodities. If we now consider the completed metamorphosis of a commodity as a whole, it appears in the first place that it is made up of two opposite and complementary movements, CM and MC. These two antithetical transmutations of the commodity are accomplished through two antithetical social processes in which the commodity owner takes part, and are reflected in the antithetical economic characteristics of the two processes. By taking part in the act of sale, the commodity owner becomes a seller. In the act of purchase, he becomes a buyer. But just as, in every transmutation of a commodity, its two forms, the commodity form and the money form, exist simultaneously but at opposite poles, so every seller is confronted with a buyer, every buyer with a seller. While the same commodity is successively passing through the two inverted transmutations, from a commodity into money and from money into another commodity, the owner of the commodity successively changes his role from seller to buyer. Being a seller and being a buyer are therefore not fixed roles, but constantly attach themselves to different persons in the course of the circulation of commodities. The complete metamorphosis of a commodity, in its simplest form, implies 4 denouements and 3 dramatis personae. First, a commodity comes face to face with money. The latter is the form taken by the value of the former, and exists over there in someone else's pocket in all its hard, material reality. A commodity owner is thus confronted with a money owner. Now, as soon as the commodity has been changed into money, the money becomes its vanishing equivalent form, whose use, value or content exists here on the spot, in the bodies of other commodities. Money, the final stage of the first transformation, is at the same time the starting point for the second. The person who is a seller in the first transaction thus becomes a buyer in the second, in which a third commodity owner comes to meet him as a seller. 2222. There are accordingly 4 final terms and 3 contracting parties, one of whom intervenes twice. Latrone, Op. Cit. Page 909. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 207. The two inverted phases of the movement which makes up the metamorphosis of a commodity constitute a circuit. Commodity form, stripping off of this form, and return to it. Of course, the commodity itself is here subject to contradictory determinations. At the starting point it is a non-use value to its owner, at the end it is a use value. So too the money appears in the first phase as a solid crystal of value into which the commodity has been transformed, but afterwards it dissolves into the mere equivalent form of the commodity. The two metamorphoses which constitute the commodity's circular path are at the same time two inverse partial metamorphoses of two other commodities. One and the same commodity, the linen, opens the series of its own metamorphoses, and completes the metamorphosis of another, the wheat. In its first transformation, the sale, the linen plays these two parts in its own person. But then it goes the way of all flesh, enters the chrysalis state as gold, and thereby simultaneously completes the first metamorphosis of a third commodity. Hence the circuit made by one commodity in the course of its metamorphosis is inextricably entwined with the circuits of other commodities. This whole process constitutes the circulation of commodities. The circulation of commodities differs from the direct exchange of products not only in form, but in its essence. We have only to consider the course of events. The weaver has undoubtedly exchanged his linen for a Bible, his own commodity for someone else's. But this phenomenon is only true for him. The Bible pusher, who prefers a warming drink to cold sheets, had no intention of exchanging linen for his Bible. The weaver did not know that wheat had been exchanged for his linen. B's commodity replaces that of A, but A and B do not mutually exchange their commodities. It may in fact happen that A and B buy from each other, but a particular relationship of this kind is by no means the necessary result of the general conditions of the circulation of commodities. We see here, on the one hand, how the exchange of commodities breaks through all the individual and local limitations of the direct exchange of products, and develops the metabolic process of human labor. On the other hand, there develops a whole network of social connections of natural origin, entirely beyond the control of the human agents. Only because the farmer has sold his wheat is the weaver able to sell his linen. Only because the weaver has sold his linen is our rash and intemperate friend able to 208 commodities in money sell his Bible, and only because the latter already has the water of everlasting life is the distiller able to sell his eau de vie. And so it goes on. The process of circulation, therefore, unlike the direct exchange of products, does not disappear from view once the use values have changed places and changed hands. The money does not vanish when it finally drops out of the series of metamorphoses undergone by a commodity. It always leaves behind a precipitate at a point in the arena of circulation vacated by the commodities. In the complete metamorphosis of the linen, for example, linen money Bible, the linen first falls out of circulation, and money steps into its place. Then the Bible falls out of circulation, and again money takes its place. When one commodity replaces another, the money commodity always sticks to the hands of some third person. 23 Circulation sweats money from every pore. Nothing could be more foolish than the dogma that because every sale is a purchase, and every purchase a sale, the circulation of commodities necessarily implies an equilibrium between sales and purchases. If this means that the number of actual sales AC accomplished is equal to the number of purchases, it is a flat tautology. But its real intention is to show that every seller brings his own buyer to market with him. Sale and purchase are one identical act, considered as the alternating relation between two persons who are in polar opposition to each other, the commodity owner and the money owner. They constitute two acts, of polar and opposite character, considered as the transactions of one and the same person. Hence the identity of sale and purchase implies that the commodity is useless if, when it is thrown into the alchemist's retort of circulation, it does not come out again as money. If, in other words, it cannot be sold by its owner, and therefore bought by the owner of the money. This identity further implies that the process, if it reaches fruition, constitutes a point of rest, an interval, long or short, in the life of the commodity. Since the first metamorphosis of a commodity is at once a sale and a purchase, this partial process is at the same time an independent process in itself. The buyer has the commodity, the seller has the money, i.e. a commodity which remains in a form capable of circulating, whether it reappears on the market at an earlier or later date. No one can sell unless someone else purchases. But no one directly needs to 23. This phenomenon may be self-evident, but it is in most cases overlooked by political economists, especially by the average free trader. Money, or the circulation of commodities 209 purchase because he has just sold. Circulation bursts through all the temporal, spatial and personal barriers imposed by the direct exchange of products, and it does this by splitting up the direct identity present in this case between the exchange of one's own product and the acquisition of someone else's into the two antithetical segments of sale and purchase. To say that these mutually independent and antithetical processes form an internal unity is to say also that their internal unity moves forward through external antitheses. These two processes lack internal independence because they complement each other. Hence, if the assertion of their external independence, Unerliche Verselständigung, proceeds to a certain critical point, their unity violently makes itself felt by producing a crisis. There is an antithesis, immanent in the commodity, between use value and value, between private labor which must simultaneously manifest itself as directly social labor, and a particular concrete kind of labor which simultaneously counts as merely abstract universal labor, between the conversion of things into persons and the conversion of persons into things. The antithetical phases of the metamorphosis of the commodity are the developed forms of motion of this immanent contradiction. These forms therefore imply the possibility of crises, though no more than the possibility. For the development of this possibility into a reality a whole series of conditions is required, which do not yet even exist from the standpoint of the simple circulation of commodities. 24-24. See my observations on James Mill in Zur Kritik etc., pp. 74-6, English translation, pp. 96-8. There are 2 points here which are characteristic of the method of the bourgeoisie's economic apologists. The first is the identification of the circulation of commodities with the direct exchange of products, achieved simply by abstracting from their differences. The second is the attempt to explain away the contradictions of the capitalist process of production by dissolving the relations between persons engaged in that process of production into the simple relations arising out of the circulation of commodities. The production and circulation of commodities are however phenomena which are to be found in the most diverse modes of production, even if they vary in extent and importance. If we are only familiar with the abstract categories of circulation, which are common to all of them, we cannot know anything of their differentia specifica, and we cannot therefore pronounce judgment on them. In no science other than political economy does there prevail such a combina, Personificierung der Sachen und Verwirklichung der Personen. More succinctly, personification of things and reification of persons. 210 Commodities and money, b. The circulation of money, the change of form through which the metabolism of the products of labor is accomplished, CMC, requires that a given value shall form the starting point of the process, in the shape of a commodity, and that it shall return to the same point in the shape of a commodity. This movement of commodities is therefore a circuit. On the other hand, the form of this movement excludes money from the circuit. The result of the movement is not the return of the money, but its continued removal further and further away from its starting point. As long as the seller sticks fast to his money, which is the transformed shape of his commodity, that commodity is still at the stage of the first metamorphosis. In other words, it has completed only the first half of its circulatory course. Once the process of selling in order to buy is complete, the money again leaves the hands of its original possessor. Of course, if the weaver, having bought the Bible, sells more linen, money comes back into his hands. But this return is not a result of the circulation of the first 20 yards of linen. That circulation rather removed money from the hands of the weaver and placed it in those of the Bible pusher. The return of money to the weaver results only from the renewal or repetition of the same process of circulation with a fresh commodity, and it ends in the same way as the previous process. Hence the movement directly imparted to money by the circulation of commodities takes the form of a constant removal from its starting point, a path followed from the hands of one commodity owner into those of another. This path is its circulation, currency, cours de monnaie. The circulation of money is the constant and monotonous retion of great self-importance with the mouthing of elementary commonplaces. For instance, J.B. Say sets himself up as a judge of crises because he knows that a commodity is a product. The conception adopted by Ricardo from the tedious Say, that overproduction is not possible, or at least that no general glut of the market is possible, is based on the proposition that products are exchanged against products. Theories of Surplus Value, Part 2, page 493. In his Traité d'économie politique, Volume 2, Paris, 1814, page 382, Say writes, products can only be bought with products. We have chosen to regard the words in parentheses as explanatory synonyms rather than suggested translations of the German word, Umlauf. The use of the word currency for circulation of money was old-fashioned even in 1867. Money, or the circulation of commodities 211 petition of the same process. The commodity is always in the hands of the seller, the money, as a means of purchase, always in the hands of the buyer. And money serves as a means of purchase by realizing the price of the commodity. By doing this, it transfers the commodity from the seller to the buyer, and removes the money from the hands of the buyer into those of the seller, where it again goes through the same process with another commodity. That this one-sided form of motion of the money arises out of the two-sided form of motion of the commodity is a circumstance which is hidden from view. The very nature of the circulation of commodities produces a semblance of the opposite. The first metamorphosis of a commodity is visibly not only the money's movement, but also that of the commodity itself. In the second metamorphosis, on the contrary, the movement appears to us as the movement of the money alone. In the first phase of its circulation, the commodity changes places with the money. Thereupon the commodity, in its shape as an object of utility, falls out of circulation into consumption. 25 Its value shape or monetary larva steps into its shoes. It then passes through the second phase of its circulation, no longer in its own natural shape, but in its monetary shape. With this, the continuity of the movement depends entirely on the money, and the same movement which, for the commodity, includes two opposed processes, is, when considered as the movement of the money, always one in the same process, a constant change of places with commodities which are always different. Hence the result of the circulation of commodities, namely the replacement of one commodity by another, appears not to have been mediated by its own change of form, but rather by the function of money as means of circulation. As means of circulation, money circulates commodities, which in and for themselves lack the power of movement, and transfers them from hands in which they are non-use values into hands in which they are use values, and this process always takes the opposite direction to the path of the commodities themselves. Money constantly removes commodities from the sphere of circulation, by constantly stepping into their place in circulation, and in this way continually moving away from its own starting point. Hence, although the movement 25, even when the commodity is sold over and over again, a situation we are not yet concerned with, it falls, when definitely sold for the last time, out of the sphere of circulation into that of consumption, where it serves either as means of subsistence or means of production. 212 Commodities and money of money is merely the expression of the circulation of commodities. The situation appears to be the reverse of this, namely the circulation of commodities seems to be the result of the movement of money. 26 Again, money functions as a means of circulation only because in it the value possessed by commodities has taken on an independent shape. Hence its movement, as the medium of circulation, is in fact merely the movement undergone by commodities while changing their form. This fact must therefore make itself plainly visible in the circulation of money. Thus the linen, for instance, first of all changes its commodity form into its money form. The final term of its first metamorphosis cm, the money form, then becomes the first term of its final metamorphosis mc, its transformation back into the shape of the Bible. But each of these two changes of form is accomplished by an exchange between commodity and money, by their reciprocal displacement. The same pieces of coin come into the seller's hand as the alienated form of the commodity and leave it as the commodity in its absolutely alienable form. They are displaced twice. The first metamorphosis of the linen puts these coins into the weaver's pocket, the second draws them out of it. The two opposite changes undergone by the same commodity are reflected in the displacement. twice repeated but in opposite directions, of the same pieces of coin. If however only a one-sided metamorphosis takes place, if there are only sales or only purchases, then a given piece of money changes its place only once. Its second change of place always expresses the second metamorphosis of the commodity, its reconversion from money. The frequently repeated displacement of the same coins reflects not only the series of metamorphoses undergone by a single commodity, but also the mutual entanglement of the innumerable metamorphoses in the whole world of commodities. It is in any case evident that all this is valid only for the simple circulation of commodities, the form we are considering here. Every commodity, when it first steps into circulation and under 26, money, has no other motion than that with which it is endowed by the products, Latrone, Opt. Cit. Page 885. The passage in parentheses is an expanded version of Marx's original argument, inserted by Engels into the fourth German edition. Money, or the circulation of commodities 213 goes its first change of form, does so only to fall out of circulation once more and be replaced again and again by fresh commodities. Money, on the contrary, as the medium of circulation, haunts the sphere of circulation and constantly moves around within it. The question therefore arises of how much money this sphere continuously absorbs. In a given country there take place every day at the same time, though in different places, numerous one-sided metamorphoses of commodities, in other words, simple sales on one hand, simple purchases on the other. In their prices, the commodities have already been equated with definite but imaginary quantities of money. And since, in the direct form of circulation, being considered here, money and commodities always come into physical confrontation with each other, one at the positive pole of pure chase, the other at the negative pole of sale, it is clear that the amount of means of circulation required is determined beforehand by the sum of the prices of all these commodities. As a matter of fact, the money is only the representation in real life of the quantity of gold previously expressed in the imagination by the sum of the prices of the commodities. It is therefore self-evident that these two quantities are equal. We know, however, that, the values of commodities remaining constant, their prices vary with the value of gold, the material of money, rising in proportion as it falls, and falling in proportion as it rises. Given that the sum of the prices of commodities falls or rises in this way, it follows that the quantity of money in circulation must fall or rise to the same extent. This change in the quantity of the circulating medium is certainly caused by the money itself, yet not in virtue of its function as a medium of circulation, but rather in virtue of its function as a measure of value. First, the price of the commodities varies inversely as the value of the money, and then the quantity of the medium of circulation varies directly as the price of the commodities. Exactly the same phenomenon would arise if, for instance, instead of the value of gold falling, silver were to replace it as the measure of value, or if, instead of the value of silver rising, it were to be driven out of its function as measure of value by gold. In the one case, more silver would be in circulation than there was previously gold, and in the other case, less gold would be in circulation than there was previously silver. In each case the value of the money material, i.e. the value of the commodity serving as the measure of value, would have undergone a change, 214 commodities in money, and so too, therefore, would the prices of commodities which express their values in money, as well as the quantity of money which would need to be in circulation to realize those prices. We have already seen that the sphere of circulation has a gap in it, through which gold, or silver, or the money material in general, enters as a commodity with a given value. Hence, when money begins to function as a measure of value, when it is used to determine prices, its value is presupposed. If that value falls, the fall first shows itself in a change in the prices of those commodities which are directly exchanged with the precious metals at their source. The greater part of all other commodities, especially at the less developed stages of bourgeois society, will continue for a long time to be estimated in terms of the former value of the measure of value, which has now become antiquated and illusory. Nevertheless, one commodity infects another through their common value relation, so that their prices, expressed in gold or silver, gradually settle down into the proportions determined by their comparative values, until finally the values of all commodities are estimated in terms of the new value of the monetary metal. This process of equalization is accompanied by a continued increase in the quantity of the precious metals, owing to the influx needed to replace the commodities directly exchanged with them. In proportion, therefore, as the adjusted prices of the commodities become universal, in proportion as their values come to be estimated according to the new value of the metal, which has fallen and may, up to a certain point, continue to fall, in that same proportion does the increased mass of metal which is necessary for the realization of the new prices become available. A one-sided observation of the events which followed the discovery of fresh supplies of gold and silver led some people in the 17th and more particularly in the 18th century to the false conclusion that the prices of commodities had risen because there was more gold and silver acting as the means of circulation. Henceforth we shall assume the value of gold is a given factor, as in fact it is if we take it at the moment when we estimate the price of a commodity. On this assumption, then, the quantity of the medium of circulation is determined by the sum of the prices to be realized. If we now further assume that the price of each commodity is given, the sum of the prices clearly depends on the total amount of commodities found in circulation. We do not need to rack our brains to grasp that if our quarter of wheat costs £2, 100 quarters will cost money, or the circulation of commodities £215 200 quarters £400, and so on, and therefore that the quantity of money which changes places with the wheat, when it is sold, must increase as the quantity of the wheat increases. If the mass of commodities remains constant, the quantity of money in circulation surges up or down according to the fluctuations in the prices of the commodities. It rises and falls because the sum of the prices increases or diminishes as a result of the change of price. For this, it is by no means necessary that the prices of all commodities should rise or fall simultaneously. A rise or a fall in the prices of a number of leading articles is sufficient in the one case to increase, in the other to diminish, the sum of the prices of all commodities, and therefore to put more or less money in circulation. Whether the change in the price reflects an actual change in the value of the commodities, or merely fluctuations in their market prices, the effect on the quantity of the medium of circulation remains the same. Let us assume that there occur a number of unconnected and simultaneous sales, or partial metamorphoses, in different localities. Sales of, say, 1 quarter of wheat, 20 yards of linen, 1 Bible and 4 gallons of brandy. If the price of each article is £2, and the sum of the prices to be realized is consequently £8, it follows that £8 in money must enter into circulation. If, on the other hand, these same articles are links in the following chain of metamorphoses: 1 quarter of wheat, minus £2, 20 yards of linen, minus £2, 1 Bible minus £2, 4 gallons of brandy minus £2, a chain which is already well known to us. In that case, the £2 causes the different commodities to circulate after realizing their prices successively, and therefore realizing the sum of those prices, which is £8. The £2 finally comes to rest in the hands of the distiller. The £2 has turned over 4 times. It has performed 4 acts of circulation. This repeated change of place of the same pieces of money corresponds to the double change of form undergone by the commodities. It corresponds to their movement through 2 diametrically opposed stages of circulation, and the intertwining of the metamorphoses of different commodities. 2. 7. These antithetical and mutually complementary phases, through which the process passes, cannot take place alongside each other. They must follow in temporal succession. It is segments of time 27. It is products which set it, money, in motion and make it circulate. The velocity of its money's motion supplements its quantity. When necessary, it does nothing but slide from hand to hand, without stopping for a moment. Latrone, Op. Cit. pp. 915-16. 216 commodities and money therefore which form the measure of the duration of the process. In other words, the velocity of the circulation of money is measured by the number of times the same piece of money turns over within a given period. Suppose the process of circulation of the 4 articles takes a day. The sum of prices to be realized is £8. The number of times the £2 turns over during the day is 4, and the quantity of money in circulation is £2. Hence, for a given interval of time during the process of circulation, we have the following equation. The quantity of money functioning as the circulating medium equals the sum of the prices of the commodities divided by the number of times coins of the same denomination turn over. This law holds generally. The process of circulation in a given country is made up, on the one hand, of numerous isolated and simultaneous partial metamorphoses, sales, and purchases, running parallel to each other in which each coin changes its position only once, or performs only one act of circulation. On the other hand, it is made up of many distinct series of metamorphoses, partly running parallel, partly coalescing with each other, and in each of these series each coin turns over a number of times. How often each coin turns over varies according to the circumstances. Given the total number of times all the circulating coins of one denomination turn over, we can arrive at the average number of times a single coin turns over, or, in other words, the average velocity of circulation of money. The quantity of money thrown into the process of circulation at the beginning of each day is of course determined by the sum of the prices of all the commodities circulating simultaneously and side by side. But within that process coins are, so to speak, made responsible for each other. If one increases its velocity of circulation, the other slows down or completely leaves the sphere of circulation. This is because the sphere of circulation can absorb only the amount of gold which, multiplied by the average number of times its basic unit turns over, is equal to the sum of prices to be realized. Hence, if the number of acts of circulation performed by the separate pieces increases, the total number of those pieces in circulation diminishes. If the number of acts of circulation diminishes, the total number of pieces increases. Since the quantity of money which can function as means of circulation is fixed for a given average velocity of circulation, one has only to throw a given quantity of £1 notes into circulation in order to extract the same number of sovereigns from it. This trick is well known to all banks. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 217 Just as the circulation of money is in general merely a reflection of the process of circulation of commodities, i.e. their circular path through diametrically opposed metamorphoses, so too the velocity of circulation of money is merely a reflection of the rapidity with which commodities change their forms, the continuous interlocking of the series of metamorphoses, the hurried nature of society's metabolic process, the quick disappearance of commodities from the sphere of circulation, and their equally quick replacement by fresh commodities. In the velocity of circulation, therefore, there appears the fluid unity of the antithetical and complementary phases, i.e. the transformation of the commodities from the form of utility into the form of value and their retransformation in the reverse direction, or the 2 processes of sale and purchase. Inversely, when the circulation of money slows down, the 2 processes become separated, they assert their independence and mutual antagonism. Stagnation occurs in the changes of form, and hence in the metabolic process. The circulation itself, of course, gives no clue to the origin of this stagnation, it merely presents us with the phenomenon. Popular opinion is naturally inclined to attribute this phenomenon to a quantitative deficiency in the circulating medium, since it sees money appear and disappear less frequently at all points on the periphery of circulation, in proportion as the circulation of money slows down. 28. The total quantity of money functioning during a given period as the circulating medium is determined on the one hand by the sum of the prices of the commodities in circulation, and on the other hand by the rapidity of alternation of the antithetical pro 28. Money being the common measure of buying and selling, everybody who hath anything to sell, and cannot procure chapmen for it, is presently apt to think, that want of money in the kingdom, or country, is the cause why his goods do not go off, and so, want of money is the common cry, which is a great mistake. What do these people want, who cry out for money? The farmer complains. He thinks that were more money in the country, he would have a price for his goods. Then it seems money is not his want, but a price for his calm and cattle, which he would sell, but cannot. Why cannot he get a price? 1. Either there is too much corn and cattle in the country, so that most who come to market have need of selling, as he hath, and few of buying. Or, 2. There wants the usual vent abroad by transportation. Or, 3. The consumption fails, as when men, by reason of poverty, do not spend so much in their houses as formerly they did. Wherefore it is not the increase of specific money, which would at all advance the farmer's goods, but the removal of any of these three causes, which do truly keep down the market. The merchant and shopkeeper want money in the same manner, that is, they want a vent for the goods they deal in, by reason that the markets fail. A nation, 218 commodities and money cesses of circulation. The proportion of the sum of the prices which can on average be realized by each single coin depends on this rapidity of alternation. But the sum of the prices of the commodities depends on the quantity, as well as on the price, of each kind of commodity. These three factors, the movement of prices, the quantity of commodities in circulation, and the velocity of circulation of money, can all vary in various directions under different conditions. Hence the sum of the prices to be realized, and consequently the quantity of the circulating medium conditioned by that sum, will vary with the very numerous variations of the three factors in combination. Here we shall outline only the most important variations in the history of commodity prices. While prices remain constant, the quantity of the circulating medium may increase owing to an increase in the number of commodities in circulation, or a decrease in the velocity of circulation of money, or a combination of the two. On the other hand, the quantity of the circulating medium may decrease with a decreasing number of commodities, or with an increasing rapidity of circulation. With a general rise in the prices of commodities, the quantity of the circulating medium will remain constant. If the number of commodities in circulation decreases proportionally to the increase in their prices, or if the velocity of monetary circulation increases at the same rate as prices rise, the number of commodities in circulation remaining constant. The quantity of the circulating medium may decrease, owing to a more rapid decrease in the number of commodities, or to a more rapid increase in the velocity of monetary circulation, in comparison with the fall in the prices of commodities. Never thrives better than when riches are tossed from hand to hand. Sir Dudley North, Discourses upon Trade, London, 1691. pp.11 to 15 passum. Heron Schwann's fanciful notions amount merely to this, that the contradictions which arise from the nature of commodities, and therefore come to the surface in their circulation, can be removed by increasing the amount of the medium of circulation. It should be mentioned in passing that it by no means follows, from the fact that the popular ascription of stagnation in the processes of production and circulation to an insufficiency of the circulating medium is a delusion, that an actual shortage of the circulating medium resulting from, say, bungling government interference with the regulation of currency, may not for its part give rise to stagnation. Jean Herenschwann, 1728-1812, Swiss economist, author of De l'Economie politique moderne, London, 1786, and De l'Economie politique LNW Rail de l'Espèce humaine, London, 1796. Money, or the circulation of commodities 219. With a general fall in the prices of commodities, the quantity of the circulating medium will remain constant, if the number of commodities increases proportionally to their fall in price, or if the velocity of monetary circulation decreases in the same proportion. The quantity of the circulating medium will increase, if the number of commodities increases more quickly, or the rapidity of circulation decreases more quickly than the prices fall. The variations of the different factors may be mutually compensatory, so that notwithstanding their continued instability, the sum of the prices to be realized in the quantity of money in circulation remains constant. Consequently, we find, especially if we take long periods into consideration, that the quantity of money in circulation in each country diverges far less from its average level than we should at first sight have expected, with the exception of the violent perturbations which arise periodically, either from crises in production and commerce, or, more rarely, from changes in the value of money itself. The law that the quantity of the circulating medium is determined by the sum of the prices of the commodities in circulation, and the average velocity of the circulation of money, the 29th of May also be stated as follows. Given the sum of the values of commodities, and the average rapidity of their metamorphosis, the quantity of money or of the material of money in circulation depends on its 29. There is a certain measure and proportion of money requisite to drive the trade of a nation, more or less than which would prejudice the same. Just as there is a certain proportion of farthings necessary in a small retail trade, to change silver money, and to even such reckonings as cannot be adjusted with the smallest silver pieces. Now, as the proportion of the number of farthings requisite in commerce is to be taken from the number of people, the frequency of their exchanges, as also, and principally, from the value of the smallest silver pieces of money, so in like manner, the proportion of money, gold and silver specie, requisite in our trade, is to be likewise taken from the frequency o, commutations, and from the bigness of the payments. William Petty, A Treatise of Taxes and Contributions, London, 1667, page 17. Hearn's theory was defended against the attacks of J. Stewart and others by A. Young, in his Political Arithmetic, London, 1774, where there is a special chapter on this, entitled, Prices Depend on Quantity of Money, pp. 112 if. I stated in Zur Kritik etc., page 149, English edition, page 168. He, Adam Smith, quietly eliminates the question about the amount of coin in circulation. Hume's theory, first advanced in Essays Moral, Political, and Literary, Part 2, London, 1752, was that the prices of commodities depend on the amount of money in circulation, rather than the amount of money in circulation depending on the prices of commodities. It is criticized in detail in a contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, pp. 160-64. 220 Commodities and money own value. The illusion that it is, on the contrary, prices which are determined by the quantity of the circulating medium, and that the latter for its part depends on the amount of monetary material which happens to be present in a country. 30 had its roots in the absurd hypothesis adopted by the original representatives of this view that commodities enter into the process of circulation without a price, and money enters without a value, and that, once they have entered circulation, an aliquot part of the medley of commodities is exchanged for an aliquot part of the heap of precio and metals. 31 by quite improperly regarding money as a simple commodity. This is only true in so far as Adam Smith treats of money while developing his own theories. Occasionally, however, for example in criticizing earlier systems of political economy, he takes the correct view. The quantity of coin in every country is regulated by the value of the commodities which are to be circulated by it. The value of the goods annually bought and sold in any country requires a certain quantity of money to circulate and distribute them to their proper consumers, and can give employment to no more. The channel of circulation necessarily draws to itself a sum sufficient to fill it, and never admits any more. Wealth of Nations, BKIV, ch. 1. In similar fashion Smith begins his work in the official manner with an apotheosis of the division of labor. Later on, in the last book, On the Sources of the Public Revenue, he occasionally reproduces the denunciations of the division of labor made by his teacher, A. Ferguson. T30. The prices of things will certainly rise in every nation, as the gold and silver increase amongst the people, and consequently, where the gold and silver decrease in any nation, the prices of all things must fall proportionately to such decrease of money. Jacob Vanderland. Money Answers All Things, London, 1734, page 5. A close comparison of this book with Hume's essays leaves not the slightest doubt in my mind that Hume knew and used Vanderland's work, which is certainly an important one. The opinion that prices are determined by the quantity of the circulating medium was also held by Barbon and other much earlier writers. No inconvenience, says Vanderland, can arise by an unrestrained trade, but very great advantage, since, if the cash of the nation be decreased by it, which prohibitions are designed to prevent, those nations that get the cash will certainly find everything advance in price, as the cash increases amongst them. And our manufactures, and everything else, will soon become so moderate as to turn the balance of trade in our favor, and thereby fetch the money back. Ogden, Op. Cit. pp. 43, 44, 31. That each single kind of commodity, through its price, forms an element in the sum of the prices of all the commodities in circulation, is self-evident. But how mutually incommensurable use values are to be exchanged, en masse, BKV, ch. 2, of the Wealth of Nations is entitled, Of the Sources of the General or Public Revenue of the Society, T for Adam Ferguson's denunciation of the division of labor, see below, page 474. Money, or the circulation of commodities 221, c. Coin. The symbol of value money takes the shape of coin because of its function as the circulating medium. The weight of gold represented in the imagination by the prices or money names of the commodities has to confront those commodities, within circulation, as coins or pieces of gold of the same denomination. The business of coining, like for the total sum of gold or silver in a country, is quite incomprehensible. If we can perform the swindle of converting the world of commodities into one single total commodity, of which each commodity is merely an aliquot part, we arrive at this beautiful calculation. The total commodity equals XCWT of gold. Commodity A equals an aliquot part of the total commodity equals the same aliquot part of XCWT of gold. This is stated in all seriousness by Montesquieu. If one compares the amount of gold and silver in the world with the sum of the commodities available, it is certain that each product or commodity, taken in isolation, could be compared with a certain portion of the total amount of money. Let us suppose that there is only one product, or commodity, in the world, or only one that can be purchased, and that it can be divided in the same way as money. A certain part of this commodity would then correspond to a part of the total amount of money. half the total of the one would correspond to half the total of the other, etc. The determination of the prices of things always depends, fundamentally, on the relation between the total amount of things and the total amount of their monetary symbols. Montesquieu, Op. Cit. Volume 3, pp. 12, 13. As to the further development of this theory by Ricardo and his disciples, James Mill, Lord Overstone and others, see Zur Kritik, etc., pp. 140-46, and pp. 150 featuring, English edition, pp. 179-85 and 169-77. John Stuart Mill, with his usual eclectic logic, understands how to hold at the same time the view of his father, James Mill, and the opposite view. When we compare the text of his Compendium Principles of Political Economy with the preface to the first edition, where he announces himself as the Adam Smith of his day, we do not know what we should be most astonished at, the naivete of the man or that of the public which accepted him in good faith as the new Adam Smith, for he bears about as much resemblance to Adam Smith as General Williams, of Carr's, Dollard as to the Duke of Wellington. The original researches of Mr. J. S. Mill in the domain of political economy, which are neither extensive nor profound, will all be found drawn up in neat and disciplined columns in his little pamphlet Some Unsettled Questions of Political Economy, which appeared in 1844. Locke expressly asserts that there is a connection between the absence of value in gold and silver, and the determination of their value by their quantity. Mankind having consented to put an imaginary value upon gold and silver. The intrinsic value, regarded in these metals, is nothing but the quantity, some considerations, etc. 1691, in Works, ed. 1777, Volume 2, page 15, asterisk. Colonel Fenwick Williams, 1800-83, was a British commissioner in charge of Turkish troops defending the fortress of Kars, in Armenia, in 1855, during the Crimean War. The fortress fell to the Russians in November 1855, but Williams was made a general and a baronet for his defense of it. 222 commodities and money. The establishing of a standard measure of prices is an attribute proper to the state. The different national uniforms worn at home by gold and silver as coins, but taken off again when they appear on the world market, demonstrate the separation between the internal or national spheres of commodity circulation and its universal sphere, the world market. The only difference, therefore, between coin and bullion lies in their physical configuration, and gold can at any time pass from one form to the other. 32 for a coin. The road from the mint is also the path to the melting pot. In the course of circulation, coins wear down, some to a greater extent, some to a lesser. The denomination of the gold in its substance, the nominal content and the real content, begin to move apart. Coins of the same denomination become different in value, because they are different in weight. The weight of gold fixed upon as the standard of prices diverges from the weight which serves as the circulating medium, and the latter thereby ceases to be a real equivalent of the commodities whose prices it realizes. The history of these difficulties constitutes the history of the coinage throughout the Middle Ages and in modern times down to the 18th century. The natural and spontaneous tendency of the process of circulation to transform the coin from its metallic existence as gold into the semblance of gold, or to transform the coin into a symbol of its official metallic content, is itself recognized by the most recent laws on the degree of metal loss which demonetizes a gold coin, i.e. renders it incapable of being circulated. The fact that the circulation of money itself splits the nominal 32. It lies of course entirely beyond my purpose to deal with such details as the seigniorage on minting. I will however cite against the romantic sycophant Adam Muller, who admires that magnificent liberality, with which the English government coins for nothing, the following opinion of Sir Dudley North: silver and gold, like other commodities, have their ebbings and flowings. Upon the arrival of quantities from Spain, it is carried into the Tower and coined. Not long after there will come a demand for bullion to be exported again. If there is none, but all happens to be in coin, what then? Melt it down again. There's no loss in it, for the coining costs the owner nothing. Thus the nation has been abused, and made to pay for the twisting of straw for asses to eat. If the merchant North was himself one of the biggest merchants at the time of Charles II, were made to pay the price of the coinage, he would not have sent his silver to the Tower without consideration, and coined money would always keep a value above uncoined silver. North, Op. Cit. Page 18. A. H. Muller, Die Amente der Staatskunst, Part 2, Berlin, 1809, page 280. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 223 Content of coins away from their real content, dividing their metallic existence from their functional existence. This fact implies the latent possibility of replacing metallic money with tokens made of some other material, i.e. symbols which would perform the function of coins. The technical obstacles to coining extremely minute quantities of gold or silver, and the circumstance that at first the less precious metal is used as a measure of value instead of the more precious, copper instead of silver, silver instead of gold, and that the less precious circulates as money until dethroned by the more precious. These facts provide a historical explanation for the role played by silver and copper tokens as substitutes for gold coins. Silver and copper coins replace gold in those regions of the circulation of commodities where coins pass from hand to hand most rapidly, and are therefore worn out most quickly. This happens where sales and purchases on a very small scale recur unceasingly. In order to prevent these satellites from establishing themselves permanently in the place of gold, the law determines the very minute proportions in which alone they can be accepted as alternative payment. The particular tracks pursued by the different sorts of coin in circulation naturally run into each other. Small change appears alongside gold for the payment of fractional parts of the smallest gold coin. Gold constantly enters into retail circulation, although it is just as constantly being thrown out again by being exchanged with small change. 33. The metallic content of silver and copper tokens is arbitrarily determined by law. In the course of circulation, they wear down even more rapidly than gold coins. Their function as coins is therefore in practice entirely independent of their weight, i.e., it is independent of all value. In its form of existence as coin, gold becomes completely divorced from the substance of its value. Relatively valueless objects, therefore, such as paper notes, can serve as 33. If silver never exceed what is wanted for the smaller payments, it cannot be collected in sufficient quantities for the larger payments. The use of gold in the main payments necessarily implies also its use in the retail trade. Those who have gold coins offering them for small purchases, and receiving with the commodity purchased a balance of silver in return, by which means the surplus of silver that would otherwise encumber the retail dealer is drawn off and dispersed into general circulation. That if there is as much silver as will transact the small payments independent of gold, the retail trader must then receive silver for small purchases, and it must of necessity accumulate in his hands. David Buchanan, Inquiry into the Taxation and Commercial Policy of Great Britain, Edinburgh, 1844, pp. 248-9. 224 Commodities and money coins in place of gold. This purely symbolic character of the currency is still somewhat disguised in the case of metal tokens. In paper money it stands out plainly. But we can see, everything depends on the first step. Here we are concerned only with inconvertible paper money issued by the state and given forced currency. This money emerges directly out of the circulation of metallic money. Credit money, on the other hand, implies relations which are as yet totally unknown, from the standpoint of the simple circulation of commodities. But it may be noted in passing that just as true paper money arises out of the function of money as the circulating medium, so does credit money take root spontaneously in the function of money as the means of payment. 34 pieces of paper on which money names are printed, such as £1, £5, etc., are thrown into the circulation process from outside by the state. In so far as they actually circulate in place of the same amount of gold, their movement is simply a reflection of the laws of monetary circulation itself. A law peculiar to the circulation of paper money can only spring up from the proportion in which that paper money represents gold. In simple terms, the law referred to is as follows: the issue of paper money must be restricted to the quantity of gold, or silver, which would actually be in circulation, and which is represented symbolically by the paper money. Now it is true that the quantity of gold which can be absorbed by the sphere of circulation constantly fluctuates above and below a CER average level. But despite this, the mass of the circulating 34. The financial mandarin Wan Maoin took it into his head one day to jay before the Son of Heaven a proposal which had the secret purpose of transforming the assignats of the Chinese Empire into convertible banknotes. The Committee on the Assignats, in its report of April 1854, severely rebuked him for this. Whether he also received the traditional thrashing with bamboo sticks is not stated. The concluding part of the report is as follows: the committee has carefully examined his proposal and finds that it is entirely in the interests of the merchants, and in no respect advantageous to the Crown. Arbeiten der Kaiserlich Russischen Gesellschaft zu Peking. Mer China, aus dem Russischen von Dr. K. Abel und F. A. Mecklenburg, Ersterband, Berlin, 1858, page 54. In his evidence before the Committee of the House of Lords on the Bank Acts, a governor of the Bank of England says, with regard to the abrasion of gold coins in the course of their circulation, every year a fresh class of sovereigns, this is not a political statement, for sovereign is a name for the pound sterling, becomes too light. The class which 1 year passes with full weight, loses enough by wear and tear to draw the scales next year against it. House of Lords Committee, 1848, D. 429. Money, or the circulation of commodities 225 medium in a given country never sinks below a certain minimum, which can be ascertained by experience. The fact that this minimum mass continually undergoes changes in its constituent parts, or that the pieces of gold of which it consists are constantly being replaced by other pieces, naturally causes no change either in its amount or in the continuity with which it flows around the sphere of circulation. It can therefore be replaced by paper symbols. If, however, all the channels of circulation were today filled with paper money to the full extent of their capacity for absorbing money, they might the next day be overfull owing to the fluctuations in the circulation of commodities. There would no longer be any standard. If the paper money exceeds its proper limit, i.e. the amount in gold coins of the same denomination which could have been in circulation, then, quite apart from the danger of becoming universally discredited, it will still represent within the world of commodities only that quantity of gold which is fixed by its immanent laws. No greater quantity is capable of being represented. If the quantity of paper money represents twice the amount of gold available, then in practice 1 pound will be the money name not of -1 of an ounce of gold, but T of an ounce. The effect is the same as if an alteration had taken place in the function of gold as the standard of prices. The values previously expressed by the price of 1 pound would now be expressed by the price of 2 pounds. Paper money is a symbol of gold, a symbol of money. Its relation to the values of commodities consists only in this: they find imaginary expression in certain quantities of gold, and the same quantities are symbolically and physically represented by the paper. Only in so far as paper money represents gold, which like all other commodities has value, is it a symbol of value. 35. Finally, one may ask why gold is capable of being replaced by 35. The following passage from Fullerton shows how unclear even the best writers on money are about its different functions. That, as far as concerns our domestic exchanges, all the monetary functions which are usually performed by gold and silver coins, may be performed as effectually by a circulation of inconvertible notes, having no value but that factitious and conventional value they derive from the law, is a fact which admits, I conceive, of no denial. Value of this description may be made to answer all the purposes of intrinsic value, and supersede even the necessity for a standard, provided only the quantity of issues be kept under due limitation. Fullerton, Regulation O, Currencies, 2nd ed., London, 1845, page 21. In other words, because the money commodity is capable of being replaced in circulation by mere symbols of value, it is superfluous as a measure of value and a standard of prices. 226 commodities and money valueless symbols of itself. As we have already seen, it is capable of being replaced in this way only if its function as coin or circulating medium can be singled out or rendered independent. Now this function of being the circulating medium does not attain an independent position as far as the individual gold coins are concerned, although that independent position does appear in the case of the continued circulation of abraded coins. A piece of money is a mere coin, or means of circulation, only as long as it is actually in circulation. But what is not valid for the individual gold coin is valid for that minimum mass of gold which is capable of being replaced by paper money. That mass constantly haunts the sphere of circulation, continually functions as a circulating medan, and therefore exists exclusively as the bearer of this function. Its movement therefore represents nothing but the continued alternation of the inverse phases of the metamorphosis CMC, phases in which the commodity's shape as a value confronts it only to disappear again immediately. The presentation of the exchange value of a commodity as an independent entity is here only a transient aspect of the process. The commodity is immediately replaced again by another commodity. Hence in this process which continually makes money pass from hand to hand, it only needs to lead a symbolic existence. Its functional existence so to speak absorbs its material existence. Since it is a transiently objectified reflection of the prices of commodities, it serves only as a symbol of itself, and can therefore be replaced by another symbol. 36. One thing is necessary, however, the symbol of money must have its own objective social validity. The paper acquires this by its forced currency. The state's compulsion can only be of any effect within that internal sphere of circulation which is circumscribed by the bound areas of a given community, but it is also only within that sphere that money is completely absorbed in its function as medium of circulation, and is therefore able to receive, in the form of paper. 36. From the fact that gold and silver themselves become their own symbols, in so far as they are coins, exclusively have the function of the medium of circulation, Nicholas Barbon deduces the right of governments to raise money, to give to the quantity of silver called a shilling the name of a greater quantity, such as a crown, and so to pay back shillings to creditors instead of crowns. Money does wear and grow lighter by often telling over. It is the denomination and currency of the money that men regard in bargaining, and not the quantity of silver. 'Tis the public authority upon the metal that makes it money. N. Barbon, Op. Cit. Page 29, 30, 25. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 227. Money, a purely functional mode of existence in which it is externally separated from its metallic substance. 3. Money, the commodity which functions as a measure of value and therefore also as the medium of circulation, either in its own body or through a representative, is money. Gold, or silver, is therefore money. It functions as money, on the one hand, when it has to appear in person as gold. It is then the money commodity, neither merely ideal, as when it is the measure of value, nor capable of being represented, as when it is the medium of circulation. On the other hand, it also functions as money when its function, whether performed in person or by a representative, causes it to be fixed as the sole form of value, or, in other words, as the only adequate form of existence of exchange value in the face of all the other commodities, here playing the role of use values pure and simple. Hoarding the continuous circular movement of the two antithetical metamorphoses of commodities, or the repeated alternating flow of sale and purchase, is reflected in the unceasing turnover of money, in the function it performs of a perpetuum mobile of circulation. But as soon as the series of metamorphoses is interrupted, as soon as sales are not supplemented by subsequent purchases, money is immobilized. In other words, it is transformed, as Boisgobert says, from moble into immovable. From coin into money. When the circulation of commodities first develops, there also develops the necessity and the passionate desire to hold fast to the product of the first metamorphosis. This product is the transformed shape of the commodity, or its gold chrysalis. 37. Commodities are thus sold not in order to buy commodities, but in 37. Monetary wealth is nothing but wealth in products, transformed into money. Mercier de la Rivière, Op. Cit. Page 573. A value in the form of a product has merely changed its form. Ibid. Page 486. From movable into immovable. Boisgobert, La Detail de F. A. France, in Économistes Financières du XXe siècle. T. ed. E. Dira, Paris, 1843, page 213. 228 Commodities and money order to replace their commodity form by their money form. Instead of being merely a way of mediating the metabolic process, Stoffwechsel, this change of form becomes an end in itself. The form of the commodity in which it is divested of content is prevented from functioning as its absolutely alienable form, or even as its merely transient money form. The money is petrified into a hoard, and the seller of commodities becomes a hoarder of money. In the very beginnings of the circulation of commodities, it is only the excess amounts of use value which are converted into money. Gold and silver thus become of themselves social express ions for superfluity or wealth. This naive form of hoarding is perpetuated among those peoples whose traditional mode of production, aimed at fulfilling their own requirements, corresponds to a fixed and limited range of needs. This is true of the Asiatics, particularly the Indians. Vanderland, who imagines that the prices of commodities in a country are determined by the quantity of gold and silver to be found in it, asks himself why Indian commodities are so cheap. Answer: because the Indians bury their money. From 1602 to 1734, he remarks, they buried 150 million pounds worth of silver, which originally came from America to Europe. 38 From 1856 to 1866, in other words in 10 years, England exported to India and China, but most of the metal exported to China flows back again to India, 120 million pounds in silver, which had been received in exchange for Australian gold. With more developed commodity production, every producer is compelled to secure for himself the nexus rerum, the social pledge. 39 His needs are ceaselessly renewed, and necessitate the continual purchase of other people's commodities, whereas the production and sale of his own commodity costs time and is subject to various accidents. In order then to be able to buy without selling, he must have sold previously without buying. This operation, conducted on a general scale, seems to involve a self-contradiction. But at the sources of their production the precious metals are directly exchanged for other commodities. And here we have sales, by the owners of commodities, without purchases, by 38. 'Tis by this practice they keep all their goods and manufactures at such low rates. Vanderland, Op. Cit. pp. 95-6, 39. Money is a pledge. John Bellers, Essays about the Poor, Manufactures, Trade, Plantations, and Immorality, London, 1699, page 13. In Roman law, the objurgation of the debtor to the creditor. Money, or the circulation of commodities. 229 The owners of gold or silver, 40 and later sales, again without subsequent purchases, merely bring about a further distribution of the precious metals among all the owners of commodities. In this way, hoards of gold and silver of the most various sizes are piled up at all the points of commercial intercourse. With the possibility of keeping hold of the commodity as exchange value, or exchange value as a commodity, the lust for gold awakens. With the extant scion of commodity circulation there is an increase in the power of money, that absolutely social form of wealth which is always ready to be used. Gold is a wonderful thing. Its owner is master of all he desires. Gold can even enable souls to enter paradise. Columbus, Indiana. His letter from Jamaica, 1503. Since money does not reveal what has been transformed into it, everything, commodity or not, is convertible into money. Everything becomes saleable and purchasable. Circulation becomes the great social retort into which everything is thrown, to come out again as the money crystal. Nothing is immune from this alchemy. The bones of the saints cannot withstand it, let alone more delicate res sacrosanctae, extra commercium hominum. 41 Just as in money every qualitative difference between commodities is extinguished, so too for its part, as a radical leveler, it extinguishes all distinct tions. 42 But money is itself a commodity, an external object. 40. A purchase, in the strict sense, implies that gold and silver are already the transformed shape of commodities, in other words the product of a sale. 41. Henry III, Roi Tres Chrétien, robbed monasteries etc. of their relics and turned them into money. It is well known what part the despoiling of the Delphic temple by the Phocians played in the history of Greece. Among the ancients, temples served as the dwellings of the gods of commodities. They were sacred banks. With the Phoenicians, a trading people par excellence, money was the transmuted shape of everything. It was, therefore, quite in order that the virgins who at the feast of the goddess of love gave themselves to strangers should offer to the goddess the piece of money they received in payment. 42. Gold? Yellow, glittering, precious gold? Thus much of this will make black, white, foul, fair, wrong, right, base, noble, old, young, coward, valiant. What this, you gods? Why, this will lug your priests and servants from your sides, pluck stout men's pillows from below their heads. Most Christian king. The official title of the kings of France. 457 BC The Phocians, in alliance with Athens, seized Delphi. Consecrated objects, beyond human commerce. In this case, the Phoenician virgins. 230 Commodities and money capable of becoming the private property of any individual. Thus the social power becomes the private power of private persons. Ancient society therefore denounced it as tending to destroy the economic and moral order. 43 Modern society, which already in its infancy had pulled Pluto by the hair of his head from the bowels of the earth. 44 Greets gold as its holy grail, as the glittering incarnation of its innermost principle of life. The commodity, as a use value, satisfies a particular need and forms a particular element of material wealth. But the value of a commodity measures the degree of its attractiveness for all other elements of material wealth, and therefore measures the social wealth of its owner. To the simple owner of commodities among the barbarians, and even to the peasant of Western Europe, value is inseparable from the value form, hence an increase in his hoard of gold and silver is an increase in value. It is true that the value of money varies, whether as a result of a variation in its own value, or of a change in the values of commodities. But this on the one hand does not prevent 200 ounces of gold from continuing to contain more value than 100 ounces, nor on the other hand does it prevent the metallic natural form of this object from continuing to be the universal equivalent form of all other commodities, and the directly social incarnation of all human labor. The hoarding drive is boundless in its nature. Qualitatively or formally considered, money is independent of all limits, that is, it is the universal representative of material wealth because it is directly convertible into this yellow slave will knit and break religions, bless the accursed, make the whore leprosy adored, place thieves, and give them title, knee and approbation, with senators on the bench. This is it, that makes the wappened widow wed again. Come damned earth, thou common whore of mankind. Shakespeare, Timon of Athens, Act 4, Scene 3, 43. Nothing so evil as money ever grew to be current among men. This lays cities low, this drives men from their homes, this trains and warps honest souls till they set themselves to works of shame. This still teaches folk to practice villainies, and to know every godless deed. Sophocles, Antigone, 44. Avarice hopes to drag Pluto himself out of the bowels of the